Hey everyone, and welcome to Pixels, a podcast for the discerning gamer. Hello everyone, and welcome to this very special episode of Pixels for a very special year. My name is Patrick Beja, and usually we talk about the news from the video games world. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of that, but we're probably not going to be spending as much time on the news as they would warrant, because there are some pretty impressive things happening, because this is, as you probably already know, our Games of the Year episode. We're going to be talking about our favorite games of this year, and there are many. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what all of the co-hosts have to say. And by the way, this is episode 100 of Pixels. So what better way to celebrate 100 episodes than to actually talk about fantastic games for this year? And we have a supersized crew assembled today, which I'm going to start welcoming on the show now. First, my very often companion, Ed, is back with us. How's it going, Ed?
It's going good. It's going good. Cedar season is in full force in Texas, so sorry if I sound a little groggy.
Well, I think we were joking about this a little bit before the show started. Everyone was taking turns saying how tired and sick they were. So, as I was saying, this is a great way to start a podcast. We're all sick, tired. But you know what? The power of video games and friendship is going to bring us joy and energy, as I'm sure Jocelyn Moffat will confirm. How's it going, Joss?
Good. I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me, Patrick.
I'm so glad to have you on. We were joking about this as well before the show. Last time we actually spoke was for our favorite games of 2017. So
I know. So literally a year ago. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what you are going to be telling us. And I don't know what any of anyone's games are. I kind of have a little bit of a clue for some of you, because we interact a little bit on Twitter and on podcasts, and I listen to all of you. But I'm still, the surprise is the fun part. We also are welcoming Jeff Canada from DLC and many other fine places. How's it going, Jeff?
It's going well, Patrick. Happy congratulations on 100 episodes. That's no small feat.
Thank you. I think you are the VR stamp of approval for this show, so I will be disappointed if there isn't at least one VR game in your favorite games of the year.
Oh, it's been a very good year for VR, so rest assured that will happen.
Excellent. And finally, very happy to be welcoming back on the show Olivia. How's it going, Olivia Grace?
It's going great. Thank you, Patrick. It's it's a chilly San Francisco morning for me, and I too am coming off the tail end of an absolutely delightful flu. So leaning into the power of video games that's actually pulled me through a lot of this flu, honestly. Quite
excellent.
Good time for gaming.
Do you have a Switch or not?
I have pretty much one of every console that you can think of.
All right. So I can imagine
PlayStation, I have an Xbox, I have a 3DS, I have I'm a console hoarder as well. I keep all the old ones.
I'm pretty sure a few of us had some miserable afternoons in bed as we were laying down sick, and with the Switch comforting us and getting us through that trial. So I'm sure that was the case for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all of us were playing just Fortnite, of course, on the Switch. What else do you do on the Switch? Obviously,
there are other games on the Switch.
All right, so before we do talk about our favorite games, I did want to talk about a few bits of news. As I said, we're not going to be spending too much time on them, even though they would warrant that in a regular episode, but I did want to mention them. The first one is on the back of Steam announcing a reduction in their fee when you publish game on their platforms, and then essentially Epic destroying them with their store, where Steam is taking between 30 and, in very rare cases, 25 or 20%. Epic has announced they will be taking 12%, which, you know, is a lot less than 30. And Discord just announced they're going to be taking 10% of the revenue of the games you publish on their platform. Of course, Epic has Fortnite to one of the many arguments to favor their store, and Discord has a giant user base anyway, so they also are a very strong contender, stronger than most of the other stores that have existed in the past few years. So I guess it's an open question to everyone. Do you guys think this is the I don't want to say the nail in the last nail in the coffin of Steam, because they're still very strong, but we've been talking about this for years. I think competition is finally here. I guess I'm going to give the mic to Jeff to tell us what you think about this. I thought it was a massive bit of news.
It is a massive bit of news. It's going to, I think, redefine what development looks like in the next few years. We already saw a race to the bottom in pricing with engines themselves. You know, basically game engines are free to developers at this point, really excellent ones like Unreal and Unity. And that's because this competition happened and companies were willing to take the loss to get that revenue on the back end. And now the revenue on the back end is even in competition. Epic's bold move here, and really bankrolled by the success of Fortnite, is going to, I think, revolutionize what the game industry is doing for the next 3 to 5 years. And I think we were just seeing the beginning of that with these kinds of announcements and new storefronts. And, you know, from a gamer's perspective, which is really the perspective I'm most interested in, I think this is both exciting and a little intimidating. There are already too many games, and now the barrier of entry to be a game developer is basically gone. It is so easy to create not just a game, but an excellent looking, great playing game that has incredible features. I mean, Epic is talking about making cross-platform play, cross-platform voice communication, all these things free, baseline free to developers. It's an extraordinary time to make games. It's an extraordinary time to play games. And I think we are going to see the ramifications of this play out over the next 3 to 5 years in really dramatic ways.
Yeah, you're. Oh, go ahead, Ed.
I think there's like a lot of hate that the Epic Store's been getting from like the community a little bit recently, and I think most of it boils down to like, oh, they don't have reviews, they don't have the forums and all this stuff. But like these kind of moves are a positive impact for the industry, and all the rest can come later, right? Like Steam didn't launch with forums, it didn't launch with reviews. It's been out for how long now? Like 10 plus years. So like it's had a good amount of development time. So if that's something that you're clamoring for in the Epic storefront, you need to like make your voice known and not like just hate on it for that reason, you know?
Do you find those things valuable on Steam though?
That's where I was going to go.
I don't think that I don't personally find them valuable, but I think people do. People like the community aspect of games, especially when it comes to like modding and like guides and like achievement guides and stuff like that. Like that is why people go to those forums if they're really engaged with the game that they're playing, and not having that is a detriment for that particular thing,
I guess. Olivia and Joce, I think you unmuted yourself, so I think you have things to say about the forums and community pages. Olivia, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you know, obviously, while Steam didn't launch with everything it has today, I think that, you know, Steam is kind of, for better or for worse, the current benchmark from the player perspective. I think, you know, you summarize really neatly from the developer perspective that this is just a fantastic situation for developers right now. And I'm really excited to see the future of games that are coming out now that the bar is so incredibly low. But from the consumer perspective, I really think that Steam sets the bar for that usage. I really do use the reviews. I use the reviews very heavily. particularly around buying DLC and mods, where the quality, like I'm less able to easily go online, easily listen to a podcast, because those big news beats, which people cover, are more around the original launches. And I'm much more reliant on community to get that input, those opinions, those feelings, and also the help. Like when you come up against a barrier in a game and you're just confused and you can't find any solution online, without Steam, like that Steam community and those Steam pages are invaluable for that, because all of the players are localized in one spot.
How do you manage not to find a solution online? Like I go to YouTube and search place where I'm stuck, enter, and there's like a 15 million playthroughs.
Patrick, despite being having been a video content producer myself, I do not prefer to consume that information in video form.
Right. Okay. I guess that's fair enough. Joce, what do you think?
Well, I was just going to say, like, my comment is a little bit more on the developer side of things, because I know we've seen a lot of kind of kickback from the community around things like just extra things you have to buy in the game, whether that's a loot box type system or a cosmetics or whatever, that developers have kind of been doing to subsidize the cost of creating these games. And if they're able to move to platforms that are going to give them 90% of the money that they make selling their game, then maybe in the next few years, we'll see them move away from cosmetics and loot boxes, because they won't have to supplement their income in any kind of way. They're just going to get the money from the base sale of the game. So I think this is a great thing, just for even like gamers and communities to not have to worry about those, like all the little extra microtransactions in some of these like AAA titles.
Well, I hate to be skeptical.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go.
Maybe I'm just like, maybe I'm just being too positive.
Most corporations like to make as much money as possible, so they're going to do that stuff in addition to the revenue, the extra revenue share.
Yeah,
maybe little developers won't be as enticed to do microtransactions, but the big ones, no, they're not going to give a crap.
I mean,
I think
going
that's
from
accurate.
Going from 70 to 90 is definitely, 20% increase in your revenue is incredible. And in the case of the Epic Game Store, if you use Unreal, which costs you 5% of your revenue, then it's included in the 12%. So between Discord and Epic, it's kind of a similar thing. So Epic is 7%, 12% with the engine, if you use Unreal, and Discord is 10. So it's more or less the same thing. But yeah, I think even with those 20%, the companies are going to want to sell you as much as they can, and I don't think cosmetic is going to be going away. But maybe for some of them, it might be possible to make more of a viable product without those things, with those extra 20%. And I think Steam is going to have to reply to this. I mean, Valve is going to have to do something. They can't stay at 30%. They still have a significant, an advance market share on everyone else, so they don't have to reply right this moment, but they're going to have to reply pretty quickly. And you mentioned, Jeff, the fact that they're going to that Epic unveiled their essentially cross-platform SDK that they're going to be giving out to everyone. I think this has to do with Tim Sweeney's philosophy almost. He is a militant person, and he wants to do certain things for the game industry, and he puts his wallet and company's power where his mouth is, and I think he is going to single-handedly, essentially, we got these announcements about Sony allowing finally cross-platform, but it seemed complicated, and Fortnite is the first one, and we were maybe thinking, hey, maybe just, Fortnite is going to benefit from this, and it's going to be difficult for others to implement. No, Fortnite figured it out, or more or less, and within a few weeks, they're going to have completely figured it out. And so everyone is going to have the possibility to do this in the same way, as well as Fortnite. This is incredible. It makes the development of cross-platform gameplay de facto easy thing to integrate, or more or less easy. But so I think that's pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be, I think, we are going to quickly forget the time when every game wasn't cross-platform. I think it's going to be kind of like having online functionality. There was a big hoopla when the first Xbox came out, and it was like, oh my God, every game has you can connect with every game. What they don't support 56K modems? He requires a high speed internet connection. What are they doing? They're committing suicide. And now it just seems like crazy to think that there was ever video games that didn't have that, and that's how it's going to be with crossplay. I think this move is going to result in it being just a de facto standard that every game you play very soon will have cross-platform saves, cloud saves. Pick it up on one device, put it down on another, move on. The only thing that won't do that are these first-party exclusive platform games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were mentioning that on your podcast, and I think it's very likely that this is how it's gonna work for the next generation. But I guess we'll see. Another thing I wanted to mention was this announcement by Blizzard that they're essentially, I don't want to say abandoning Heroes of the Storm, but kind of abandoning Heroes of the Storm. They waited until the last second, probably because they hadn't decided, but they waited until the last second to announce that there's not going to be their major esports competition in 2019, and that development of on the game is essentially, well, scaling back, but they're redistributing developers on other games that the company is developing, probably some unannounced games as well, but that was a bummer for many fans of this title. I'm going to turn to Jeff again. Sorry, but you're the biggest Heroes fan I know. I think possibly the biggest Heroes fan there is. I guess you're bummed out.
I am bummed out. It is my favorite game. It is a game that I play every day. It is a game that I have played for 4 years now and adore. And that news hit like a ton of bricks for me. Basically, they're canceling all their esports. The Heroes Global Championship, I think, was a very, very well produced, thrilling event that got far too few viewers to continue, it seems. But worse than that to me is the Heroes of the Dorm event, which was a collegiate event where students are competing to get scholarships to go to college. It was a very positive, fun, just wonderful video game event, and I'm sad to see it go. And yes, they have moved some developers onto other games, and they say that the very, very quick pace of new content that has defined Heroes of the Storm for the last 4 years will slow, and that's a bummer. The game is not being abandoned. I don't think that there's any fear of that happening completely. K.O. Milker, who's the game director on the game, has made a statement saying that they still have a very dedicated team. They still have plans for the game to move forward. So it is not dying. It is not a dead game. And even this week, there have been a lot of really cool announcements from the community about organizing their own informal esports tournaments. I'm hoping those happen, and I'm hoping those kind of create a grassroots lifeblood for the game that catches on. I'm still going to play it. I hope that the user base doesn't dwindle. I think it will. I think that the messaging around this kind of announcement results in people leaving the game. But as long as there's 9 other people I can play with, I'm going to keep playing it. I love the game. So I'm still hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic.
I think that also kind of begs the question of, we've heard a lot with Diablo Immortal's announcement and some articles, most notably the one by Jason Schreier over at Kotaku about the money saving that Blizzard seems to be implementing. I've commented on that quite a bit, but some people are saying this is another sign that Activision is imposing its will on Blizzard, and we are all relatively close to Blizzard. In the case of Olivia and myself, essentially we worked for the company, so take anything we say with a grain of salt. But what do you make of it? What do you think about these announcements, Olivia?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Patrick. I think I was not surprised to see the announcement in any way, shape, or form. Although I was, it's a sad situation regardless. Like, I don't think it's any great secret that even though the game has very many dedicated fans, obviously one of which is on this show, it's not been doing what I think that the initial release had hoped for. as far as like capturing that market and like really grabbing those viewers for the esports. Having worked on Heroes of the Dawn for several years and, you know, been around for the inception of Heroes esports, it's definitely disappointing. And I think it's very, very interesting for the esports industry as a whole. I think this is a harsh reminder for people who are dedicating their lives to esports that publishers do own those titles. This isn't like basketball or football, where there's an inherent nature of the game that will continue to exist regardless of a publisher. No one owns soccer, but these companies do own them, and there are external influences which may not necessarily be within the control of the people who are funding and dedicating their lives to these esports events, that mean that diversification is not only a desire but a requirement for these esports professionals. And I think that this is kind of a wake-up call. Like the Heroes of the Storm esports, to Jeff's earlier point, were huge budget. And I think that this is a wake-up call that any league can disappear. Do I think that this is Activision at play? No, I don't. I think that this is. I think that it's very easy to blame the big bad Bobby Kotick, and to kind of do that thing and sort of think of Blizzard as this like delightful, cheerful little company that just wants to make the best games it can. But I think it's, you know, in the world that we're in at the moment for Blizzard with its games and this desire to innovate in a space, that there is a necessity to make these hard calls. And I think that, you know, there's probably going to be some people out there blaming Mike's departure, J. Allen Brack's taking over.
Oh, they are. They already are. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've seen some of that. I wasn't clear on how big that was, and I don't think that any of that is what this is. I think actually it's probably more planned than any of us would perhaps anticipate. I think it's probably been a long time coming, and it's not an easy decision for anyone to make, but prioritization is important for any company. And while Blizzard has been in a very enviable situation for some time, thanks in no small part to World of Warcraft and its continued success, I think that they are now having to start making those hard choices. And they've decided to take a perhaps underperforming game and decrease investment in that in order to invest in the future. And I think that is a good call.
I think as I said when they were talking about the cost-saving moves at Blizzard with Jason Schreier's article, what I said was, well, they're not getting rid of developers and they're hiring more developers, which is what really counts when you want to make games. And in this case, they're not shutting down the quote-unquote studio inside the studio. They're keeping the devs and putting them on other things. And for a company that has like 15 million games as a service, they've tried everything they could with Heroes. And I'm sure it's doing okay. I'm sure they're not losing money on it. But I think they look at, 2-3 years out, the game is not growing. I'm guessing they have those numbers. It's not growing. It's probably shrinking. What do? They've revamped the game a couple of times. They've changed a lot of things, both gameplay and marketing, quote unquote, marketing wise. At some point, you have to decide, do we keep our full team on this, or forever, because you're never going to stop, or do we ask them to make something else that could be bigger, better, more fun, more innovative, more interesting? So yeah, I think this is something.
For me, the sad thing is that the game itself, I don't think ever really got a fair shake from gamers. I think that the big dogs of League of Legends and Dota have the player bases of those games for the most part have turned their nose up at it, and it got labeled as the sort of beginners or my first MOBA, I think unfairly. And the game is very complex. It has a lot to offer. It's extraordinarily well designed, gorgeous, and it's a bummer to me that they couldn't find the messaging that would shed that label and get more people to give it a try. Because I know a lot of people that played League or Dota and tried Heroes on a lark and then really enjoyed it. So, it just was unfortunate that it could never kind of break out of that classification that the early judgment that a lot of people gave it.
Right. But I think regardless, we can't blame Blizzard for not having tried. They've really worked on that game, updated it a lot, changed a lot of things about the way it was presented, So I think the question is, at some point, you're right. Maybe it wasn't given a fair shake, but the result is still, that it wasn't performing as they hoped. And when you look 2 years out. Anyway. All right. Ed or Joce, do you want to add something?
I was just I was going to make a comment about how basically we have this term in the industry called maintenance mode, where a project or a application or something goes kind of into a state where you kind of just work on bugs and maybe add a few other extra stuff. That's what this feels like to me, which it's sad.
I mean, they're probably
it's the reality of development.
They're probably going to be adding a couple of heroes a year or something like that. Maybe go through the rest of the roster.
I mean, they still have artists. They still have like probably a couple artists, a couple designers, stuff like that. But it's not the team that it was before, and so it's the release structure is going to reflect that.
And I think like having both Patrick and I spent time working at Blizzard, we both know that they tend to develop with a very long lead time. Making change at Blizzard is hard, so it's likely that we actually might not even see the effects of this reduction in workforce for quite some time for the game.
Joce,
Olivia just said exactly what I was going to say. So
I'm sorry,
we probably won't even. It's okay. We probably won't even see the effects of this until like maybe even 2020, because they've probably got a good year's worth of content that's pretty much ready to go. So
I think
it'll be a while before we really feel this. They might spread it out. That's true.
Yeah.
It depends how big the team is that they actually kept back, which I don't think they really said. So we'll see what happens. But I think
maybe this means we'll get Diablo faster.
Maybe. It's possible. It's entirely possible. All right. Last tidbit I wanted to mention is the release of Brawl Stars, which as core PC elitist gamers, we didn't touch any of us. Well, I did play maybe 15 minutes of it. It's a new game by Supercell, and it's essentially a 3-on-3 arena brawler. You know, maybe, Jeff, you would like it, because it's my first MOBA type of thing. And it's...
How dare you?
It's regardless of what you think about it, it has an emphasis on gameplay, and I think this is the third game that Supercell puts out that has the potential, I mean, that cares about gameplay, which is something we don't see a lot in the mobile industry. And I really think that Supercell is, of course, they rely a lot on marketing, as any mobile game company does, but they have to be commended for caring about gameplay that much. Of course, Clash Royale and Clash of Clans were super successful, but I think they're a special company in that landscape, in that they want to make good games, adapted for mobile, of course, but they are pretty good games. So I just wanted to mention it because Supercell is the first company that comes out of that ecosystem that I can honestly say, unlike, you know, Rovio and King and all of those other ones, they care about games. So I'm going to keep my eye on them and maybe even try Brawl Stars a little bit more.
Yeah, as actually a pretty big fan of Supercell's games, I've played Brawl Stars and it's really fun. Supercell is we were just talking about, you know, the games as a business as opposed to as a sort of philosophy from Blizzard and that shift. I think that Supercell is a company for me that epitomizes games as a business. They are ruthless. I think I read an article from Ilja. I can't pronounce his surname. Patrick, you're more local. Maybe you can.
They are a Finnish company.
They are a Finnish company, and that they kill 9 out of 10 of their games, and they only launch the absolute best. And I think that really shows in the quality of what they put out. I think that this is going to be another huge success for them. It came out in a soft launch 2017 in Canada, and shot straight up into the top 10 grossing from at that launch, and it's really fun. I would encourage anyone who has a phone, as we've all heard recently, that's a kind of core thing for game developers right now. So I would definitely encourage anyone to try it. It's a really good, fun, lightweight, and they've just got a great grasp of desired session length and snackability for phone-centric games. And I think I have a great deal of respect for Supercell, so I'm going to be playing the absolute crap out of this.
Yeah, even the way they design it, it's super slow in its pace because it's meant for mobile. You know, it's not trying to replicate one-to-one the experience you could have on a more traditional gaming device. But it's really well thought out. It's a hero type thing. So you have different heroes with different abilities. We'll have to see how much money you have to sink into it to progress in any way. But still, I mean, that's something I think that shouldn't be forgotten in the mobile space. All right. The time has come. We're going to be talking about our favorite games of the year. And since Olivia has more limited time than the others for being on the show, I'm going to start with you. I told everyone we are going to select each of us up to 5 of our favorite games this year. Each one of us is going to tell us about the 5, and then we can discuss each one, and each one, all of us can say what we think about them. So, Olivia, what are your favorite games of this year?
Patrick, so I sat down yesterday and I was like, oh man, I need to really think this through because, like everyone, I watch the VGAs and I, engage with that content. And actually, for me personally, like I've had a really hard time figuring out 4.5 candidates for Game of the Year this year. And I think, the typical, God of War, Red Dead, Assassin's Creed, Smash Bros, all of those games have just not really personally grabbed me. I've bought all of them, but I've dug into them. I played a little bit. I probably only played 10 hours, maybe 12 hours of God of War, a few hours of Red Dead, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Smash Bros. I haven't really dug into yet, to be honest, but all
right, be careful now, Olivia. You might incur the wrath of many of us and the audience. That's dangerous words you're saying.
It's very dangerous. But I do think it's been a tricky year for me. And I said this to some friends of mine at work yesterday. And I don't work at Twitch anymore. I work at Instagram these days, so it's less of a gamer crowd. But they were already sort of like foaming at the mouth at the idea that I could dare to not enjoy the venerable title that was God of War. But I found it really boring. I found it really irritating. I actively disliked God of War.
Oh, wow. Really? Okay.
Yeah, I really did. So I think that our other silent hosts are sort of channeling their hatred into their microphones at this exact moment.
I'm in the same boat. I'm just going to come right out in your defense and say, like, everything that you just listed, I'm like, yeah, nope, that's not on my list. That's not on. Nope.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, Olivia, I got your back. Don't worry. I got you.
God of War is my shame this year. Or
your
that
shame?
Spider-Man, actually. I didn't play it.
At
I didn't
all?
play that or Spider-Man.
I have to be the guy that speaks up for God of War. I did not expect that.
So I played like a couple hours of God of War, but then I got distracted. I moved in the middle of the summer, so like
that's even worse, Ed. You actually did play it. It's not like you didn't have the opportunity to love it. You tried, and it didn't grab you either. Wow.
No, it's not that it didn't grab me. It's just I moved in the middle of the summer, and that was right when prime God of War playing time was. And then I finished moving, and then all of a sudden everything else was coming out. So
right, that's another issue with this year.
I had to make decisions.
All right, well, we'll have an opportunity to talk about God of War, I'm sure. Jeff, I got you.
Jeff's carrying the torch for God of War, but so I guess to carry on. I kind of felt the same way about a lot of the excuse traffic noise. I'm sorry. A lot of the big titles this year I didn't even buy Spider-Man. I was so tired of male protagonist games
keep
this
on
year
like you're swinging all around.
Yeah,
that's okay.
I didn't engage with Spider-Man at all. I was, it was God of War, it was Red Dead, and I'm just like, okay, for me personally, I love playing games where I can feel like a powerful representation of myself. And so games with an exclusively male protagonist are a much harder sell for me. And
no Cassandra for you?
No,
you don't play as Cassandra?
Sure. I mean, it's sort of
which one is Cassandra?
Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Assassin's Creed
Cassandra,
Odyssey
course,
is the one where they could be Cassandra. Unfortunately for Assassin's Creed Odyssey of the big games is probably the one where I come closest to including it in my 5.
Okay.
But I would say she's an extraordinary. The performance is fantastic.
Yep.
She's a great character. I've well over 60 hours into Assassin's Creed Odyssey playing as her. I hope you give her a chance if you haven't yet, because she is fun. Just the performance alone is worth playing the game for.
Yeah, totally. And I think that God of War, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is what is kind of, I'm in the same boat where Jeff was Ed was for God of War, where I haven't had the time to dive in and really fully engage with it. But the few hours, the 6 or 7 hours of it that I have played, I was glancing at my Steam this morning before the show, I have really enjoyed. And I think it's one of those where my games to-do list has been long enough that I just haven't managed to really dive in deeply into Assassin's Creed Odyssey. But that said, so which ones do I like? So I am going to say weird things, and you're probably all going to side-eye me. But the single game that I personally have enjoyed the most this year, sunk the most hours into, had the most happiness from, is Vermintide 2.
Oh, wow.
Which launched
Okay.
in March. I have been loving that game. I have played, I looked this morning, 140 hours of Vermintide 2 this year. I have leveled multiple characters. I've done a ton of group play. I've got all the DLC. I have been having an absolute ball with that game. Now, do I feel that I should sort of take on, discuss this and try to make a case that Vermintide 2 is a quote-unquote better game than the Red Dead's God of War, Assassin's Creed Odyssey? That's a hard call. That's a hard case to make. So
I agree with you. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about the game that you loved the most, the game that gave you the most entertainment.
Absolutely.
Screw this kind of objective better idea. I think it's absolutely your right to say that that's your favorite game of the year.
It's your favorite game, right? Not like the best game of the year. Right?
And I just think it's a game that we might have to describe for some of the listeners because they have no idea what it is. You know,
I think that's wonderful. On my show we do a top 5, and then we do 5 like games that nobody else is probably going to talk about as game of the year, and I love that because that's what people should be listening to this show and discovering things and going, oh my God, I didn't play that. Not everybody is talking about it. Bravo.
I mean, to be honest, the reason I'm calling these our favorite games of the year is in large part because of your show, Jeff, because that's the way you approach it. And I think it's a great way of looking at it. So Olivia, don't feel any need to justify. Vermintide 2 is one of your favorite games of the year. Give us the 5.
Justify. Definitely justify.
Right.
I think it's, one of those things, if you think of like a game of the year, it's one of the people want to have like this big, like that tends to be the big epic giant world games, the Red Dead, God of Wars, etc. But for me, absolutely Vermintide 2. So what is it? It's if you played Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2, or indeed Vermintide, you already know what it is. It is a dungeon crawler, group-centric. You're basically killing rats, rushing through a dungeon, trying to do it in time. You get additional items that you can pick up that make your XP gain bigger, but make the dungeon harder. So, for example, you'll pick up an item called a tome, which means that you cannot heal, or you have to put the tome down, pick up a healing pot, pick the tome back up again, but you can't heal during combat. There's a book called a grimoire, which means that your total health pool is reduced, and you have 4 layers of difficulty which you can work through. There's a small but strong community for it. No one's going to be talking about this at the big award shows, but my God, I love that game. The combat they have done an amazing job of making that combat viscerally satisfying. As someone who's not really you have the gamer archetypes, my gamer archetype is killer. I love killing things in games, not in the real world. But that game is so satisfying. Like when you hit something, it feels like you can almost feel it through your body, and it's a really, really great combat implementation. My other games are equally out there and weird. So good news. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. That is probably my number 2. I've loved the Tomb Raider series. I really, really loved it. Since the 2013 one came out. And this one is a continuation of that tour de force of those games. The combat is fantastic. It feels very satisfying. The story feels compelling, but not interruptive. I just think that they're all excellent games, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider is no exception. I think it's telling for me that that's the game format that I'm really enjoying. Assassin's Creed Odyssey probably comes in next. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, in my opinion, is the best recent implementation of an Assassin's Creed. But
wait, so is it your third favorite game, or are you just mentioning it?
It's kind of, so after these two, it kind of all is equal. So It's kind of Vermintide, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, then some other games, of which in no particular order.
Okay.
So I find Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a really good recent Assassin's Creed game, but I don't find Assassin's Creed games as enjoyable in general as the Shadow of the Tomb Raider, that style of like crawler or world-based game. My other two then, just to throw those in there, and these really are in no particular order. Subnautica. I absolutely loved Subnautica. I loved
That's on my list.
That is on my list. Yay! My God, could Subnautica be the unanimous, like the one that we have in VR?
It's an awesome game. It's an awesome, especially in VR.
Oh, there we
yeah.
go.
I
That's
don't
why. That's why.
I
So
don't know
let-
if I can do it in VR.
I'm too scared of sharks to do that.
Dude,
give
I'm
us.
telling you guys, it is. I played it exclusively in VR. It is an extraordinary experience in VR. The VR implementation is great, and the idea that you're putting on a mask to go underwater, you feel like you're putting on a mask because you are putting on a mask. It's
Right.
really, really great.
So
Really
I want
goggles.
to I want to hear the last one, and then we're going to go back to a couple of them, and everyone will have a
Yeah.
chance to say. So what's the last one?
The last one for me has been a really hard one. I really wanted to love We Happy. I really wanted to be able to say We Happy Few because I love that game so much. I backed it on Kickstarter like I didn't even know how many years ago. And it came out and I was so excited and it was so bad. I was so disappointed. I wanted so much to love that game, but I was so disappointed. And I feel like Detroit Become Human is my other one.
Yes, that's on my list too.
I love
I
that
think
game.
we're like the same.
Yeah, I think we are, but it's fantastic. I really enjoyed that, and it was not for me as like that killer archetype of gamer. I didn't expect to enjoy it. I played all the way through it. I played the demo and upgraded my collection, my to the digital deluxe. And I went back and played through Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, all of the previous games in anticipation of Detroit Become Human. And it actually introduced me to that whole genre of games. So I hadn't played those before. So
Okay.
big props from that.
So, okay, I think you've made a pretty good case for Vermintide 2. I don't think anyone else has it on their list.
Has anyone else even played it? Has anyone else played Vermintide?
I
2?
haven't, but I want to now.
Yeah, I want to be a killer
I
as
literally
well.
just put it on my wish list.
Yeah, I think you sold it
We
pretty
should
well.
play it together, guys.
Excellent
Yeah.
idea.
Who wants to just stop recording and play some Vermintide, guys? We're already on Discord.
Yeah.
But I think it's 4. We're just there's 5 of us, so I guess I have to keep recording
Patrick,
alone.
you're not invited.
Yeah, Pat, no Frenchies allowed.
Your ping isn't good enough. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Who else has it on their list?
So
I will
I
tell
played
you that-
Rise of the Tomb Raider this year.
Yeah, Rise of the Tomb Raider was my show's game of the year it came out. But I don't think this game lives up to the or it's basically more of the same, so it didn't really stand out for me.
Yeah, which I
So,
think is a little bit the criticism you can level at Shadow of the Tomb Raider from everything I've heard. Olivia, isn't it a little bit more of the
I
same?
think I think that's a completely valid criticism. Like I have nothing to say against that in any way, shape, or form. I just freaking loved Rise, so I was really happy to get more
to have
of the
more
same.
of the same, yeah. I guess the one thing we can
that's the
mention.
thing. So I
Go
don't
ahead,
even
Rose.
know if you could. I mean, I guess it could necessarily be a criticism, but if you've already got a really good, enjoyable product, like why change it? Because the thing that I thought stood out about Shadow of the Tomb Raider this year was actually the story and the idea of the way that they kicked it off. With instead of Lara, being the big hero, she actually kind of starts the apocalypse. Like she's trying to help, but then it's like, whoops, guess I shouldn't have touched that. And I thought that was a really neat spin on the story of the Tomb Raiders. Like it was her final, like how she gets to where she is. She makes this big mistake in order to kind of finally become the Tomb Raider. And so I thought that the story was the strength of Shadow that was put on top of already great gameplay that everybody really loved. So it's more of the same Tomb Raider, but with a really good story on top of it.
Oh, I have to play it.
I couldn't
I
agree
have
more.
it.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I couldn't agree more with you, Jocelyn. It's like the story is compelling. Gameplay wise, it is absolutely more of the same. But yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's great.
yeah, it's good. Same.
Good same. That's a good way of putting it. I actually have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and I didn't play it. I bought it during the Black Friday sale on PlayStation, and I got Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which this is a perfect transition into. And I didn't play Shadow of the Tomb Raider because I started playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey expecting nothing. I didn't like Origins from last year. I played it for 10 hours maybe. It didn't grab me so much. And I started playing Odyssey and I was like, okay, I'll play a little bit more. And I never stopped. And I enjoyed every second of my time playing it. I must be, 30 hours in, and I'm nowhere near done. And I think one of the reasons why I liked it so much was that I was at the time playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and kind of forcing my brain into a shape that would enjoy Red Dead Redemption 2, which I do. I do kind of enjoy it, and I do want to get back to it. But playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey after that felt like, oh my God, this is what fun feels like. And the game is so complex and layers upon layers of systems that are each super fun. I don't understand why I didn't realize. It's almost, I'll say it like this. I don't understand why more people aren't raving about it. I know a lot of people are, but everyone should be raving about this game. It is tremendous. It's an incredible achievement.
I think it's because it has the Assassin's Creed title on it. And people don't realize that it's completely different than Assassin's Creed 2 and 3 and Brotherhood.
Well, it's not different from Origins. It's kind of very similar.
It's
very
kind of
similar
like
to
the
Origins.
Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
Yeah, exactly.
situation with Origins, actually.
But I think it is much better than Origins.
Yeah, I think it's that writing and story that really brings it, that elevates it really.
Yeah.
Because like especially if you play as Cassandra, like playing as her is like a completely different experience than Vayak was in Origins and really any Assassin's Creed protagonist before.
And you can't. I don't think you can.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
I was curious if anyone has played it as not. I actually can't even remember the other person's name.
Alexios?
Not Cassandra. Alexios. Thank you. How does that compare to playing it as Cassandra?
Everything. I didn't play. I jumped to Cassandra because everyone was saying. Actually, there are two reasons. First, everyone was saying she was much better, and the second reason is kind of a half militant thing. Which was, I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable playing female characters in games, and I thought, you know what, maybe I should force myself a little bit and see if not uncomfortable, that's not the right word, but, it felt a little bit weird and different, and maybe I should force myself to do it a little bit and see how it feels, and it turns out it was amazing, and I loved it, and I'm sort of in a place, personally, where I'm fine doing it now, but I don't know. I thought it was that's the reason I went with Cassandra.
The game does a really interesting thing by making that choice matter and actually plays into the story itself. I don't want to spoil that for anybody, but it's a really cool thing they do in the game where the character you didn't pick is still featured in the game. And I will also say that I think that we shouldn't discount the addition of dialogue choice into this franchise because Origins didn't have that. It's a huge improvement for me, and it really brings the game into full role playing. I mean, this game, and I know this is sacrilege to a lot of people, but I think it out-Witchers The Witcher. I think this is, for me, better than The Witcher 3. It is a more fun game than The Witcher 3, which is one of my favorite role-playing games of all time. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey is extraordinary, and I'm still playing it 60 hours in. I want to do everything. I have such fun in the world. The density of things to do and things to discover, my curiosity is always rewarded. It's an excellent game. It's an excellent game.
If anything, there's too much of it. If there's any criticism you can level at it, is that it's too long, which isn't really criticism. But Joce, did you play it? Go ahead, Olivia.
No, sorry, I was about to say, just like, I completely agree with you. Like, I think for me, part of the reason I haven't sunk more time into it, and part of the reason it's not higher on my list, is not only, I think the attachment of that Assassin's Creed title to it does do it a massive disservice. Because to me, it's categorized with those other Assassin's Creed games, which as a play style, as a series, as a system, like the overarching Assassin's Creed system, I found less compelling than other games. If they had just taken that out and made it like a Witcher-esque RPG, I would probably that would probably be number one. I'd probably have played like several hundred hours of it this year. But yeah, and every time I hear someone talk about it, I'm like, oh man, I really want to go in and me and my bud and go and do some more stuff. And it's really fun. And I think the only reason it's in position 3 for me is because of the Assassin's Creediness of it.
Fair enough. Joce, do you want to conclude this part?
Well, and I mean, like, I don't even know if you want me to conclude this part, because to be honest, I didn't even buy this game.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you played it. Okay,
no,
well,
I was so burnt by Origins that I just like I was so excited for Egypt, and I got into it. And I'm like, this is terrible. I don't even think I made it past the first town, and I was just like, I can't do it. This is not fun. So when this came out, I was like, okay, they got me with Egypt. I was super stoked to go to Egypt. Greece is like would be amazing, but I'm like, no, you burnt me with Origins. I'm not gonna do it.
I was
rave about it.
Yeah, I was almost on in that boat, and then I jumped when the Black Friday sales happened, and I jumped off of boat, and I swam to a Greek isle and was comforted by the warmth of the war between Sparta and the Athenians. And
I do think that there's something to be said about time too, right? Like, especially like when you see some of these games, you know that you're going to have to spend, 50,
That's
60,
true.
70 hours in something.
Yeah.
I'm just like, where am I going to find this chunk of time? Even if I can find a deal on Odyssey, like when do I play this?
That's true, but I always say, even if you spend, 15 hours in the game, even if you don't complete it, it's still a tremendously fun 15 hours. So,
Right.
All right, let's talk about Subnautica.
It's $30 right now.
$30. You can't honestly.
It's $30 on Green Man Gaming.
$30 for 15 hours. That's $2 an hour. That's a great deal. That you can't.
So
that's
60 in Canadian then.
So Subnautica is another game that a lot of people have been talking about. It's essentially well, can you describe it, Joce, and then others can talk about it too. Oh, sorry, not Joce. I meant.
Yeah, I was going to say it's Olivia's, but sure.
Yeah, it's your game, Olivia.
It sounds like it's everyone's. So Josh, go ahead.
It's this really cool survival base building type game, but the huge twist is the fact that it's underwater, that you have to try to gather all of your supplies from the surrounding area like any other survival game, but then there's this underwater part to it that makes it feel so much more dangerous and unknown, because it's like it's throwing you outside of your element that much more by making you go underwater. I think it took me a good hour to go more than an arm's length away from my little survival pod. I was so scared that I was gonna drown or get eaten by a shark, and I just kept going a little bit further, and it was this it had this anxiety piece to it, but in a good way. It kept my adrenaline going, which is really weird given the type of game that it is. You're not really shooting anything. You're not, it's not like a first person shooter type action oriented game, but it gave me those feelings at the same time. It was
it's the 6 degrees of freedom, right?
Yeah.
Basically, the fact that you can go up and down as well as in all four directions in front of you, that is what changes not only the way you look at the world, but also the fear that is instilled upon you. Because oh crap, a shark can come attack me from below, and I'm not even looking at that because I'm swimming towards this piece of kelp that I need really badly to build the next thing. Yeah,
it's interesting to hear you guys describe it, because I honestly, yes, there are moments of being attacked or feeling scared or feeling tense, but for me, the fundamental experience that I had with Subnautica was this serene beauty and exploration element. And I have to admit, I played the entire game with needing to feed myself turned off. I'm not a huge fan of survival games. I don't like the tick, 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 tick of the timer saying, yeah, you got to feed yourself pretty soon. So I was very happy that that option was available, and I could turn that off and I could just explore. And yes, I still had to deal with oxygen and other requirements to keep, going deeper and deeper. But I didn't feel that as much tension. And I think the most beautiful thing about the game for me is how it unveils itself over time, how it really does feel like as you get farther and farther away from safety, you're uncovering new and incredible things that I was constantly amazed by, and how the storytelling in the game is so well done. It's so beautifully subtle, and it doesn't feel. It feels like I'm discovering the story, even though the game designers have very cleverly placed these benchmarks that I will see in a certain order. But to me, it didn't feel like it was being laid out to me. It felt like I was discovering it as I went. It's an awesome game, and I highly recommend people play it in VR if you have a chance.
Point out the thing you're talking about you didn't do food and water. Like, I think that's the way the game is meant to be played, at least the first time you play it. The food and water thing was like a late addition during early access, and so I think that's definitely the way like you are intended to. The guy originally intended the original concept of the game.
Yeah,
So,
I
don't feel bad
about
about that.
No,
Olivia?
don't feel bad. I refuse to be made to feel bad by playing a game on a quote unquote easier setting. And Jeff, I'm so 100% in agreement with you. I actually played the game having watched people stream it on Twitch. That's how I found out about it. I didn't really like see it coming, and I have a burning love as a human in the real world of being underwater. I love scuba diving so much, I can't tell you. And so my experience with the game was polar opposite to yours, Joce, where
underwater terrifies me, so
I immediately, I was like,
a lot.
yeah, I was like, okay, I have this boat thing, but I can just, all of these people were like freaking out about the fish, and I was just like, I'm just gonna swim, and I streamed it. I streamed my early gameplay with it, and my entire chat was saying, Olivia, you're drowning, Olivia, you're drowning, Olivia, you're drowning. And I drowned like 8 or 9 times because I was just like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And Jeff, like, as you was, I didn't even know there was a story. Like, I didn't know there was a story when I bought the game. And so I was just like, it's a fish exploration game. I'm just so happy about this. Like, I did. And so the story came out of nowhere. Like, I didn't even know it was there. Yeah. And it was just fantastic. Like, I like thinking about that game now, I'm just like, man. And Jeff, you need to tell me immediately which VR headset to buy to play it underwater, because I've been like hovering over the buy button on VR. It's Oculus. Okay, great, done, sold.
I played it on Oculus. It only supports a regular controller, which usually to me is a bummer. But in this game, it was absolutely perfect. I sat in a chair and I just felt like I had a real scuba apparatus on my face. I was looking all around. You would come up out of the water and little droplets would come across your vision, and the 3D of the environment, it was gorgeous. It's a really big bummer to me that it has just been released on PlayStation and it does not support PlayStation VR, at least not yet.
Oh, it doesn't?
Because it does not. No, it's a huge bummer.
That is a great shame.
Because I have it on PlayStation. But and by the way, before I forget, it is free on the Epic Game Store until the 27th. So if you're listening to this before the 27th, you can actually get it for free on the Epic Game Store, which is kind of mind-blowing. But
that's amazing. Yeah, and I think for me, like I absolutely, like, I've been going backwards and forwards between the Oculus and the Vive. The only thing stopping me like buying one immediately was that I'm like, I have a suspicion we're getting a Vive upgrade early next year. But yeah, I think I loved that game so much, and I think that's a game where I was always like, I'm going to come back to this, because I haven't actually completed. I don't feel like I've got to the end of the story yet. Like, I still feel like there's a lot left out there for me to discover. And I'm very excited to get back into that game and discover all of that great story.
This was the game on my list that was going to be like, nobody's got this one. Nobody else. This is the big surprise one. But I'm so glad you guys are all on that page.
I think I completely agree with you, Jeff, when you're talking about the Zen kind of moments. Like at the beginning, like you're kind of terrified of how expansive this water area is, and I think Joce was saying, like going like more than a couple feet from your boat. But later on, you like, as you start exploring new areas and just admiring the scenery and the art and the colors of this underwater ecosystem, multiple different ecosystems, you definitely slide into more of like just kind of soaking it all in as you play. It's incredible.
All right. I've played it for 2 hours. I guess I have to get back to it now. And get Vermintide 2. Last one, Detroit Become Human. I'm guessing, Joce, you were basically cheering when she mentioned it. So you also liked it. Why is this game good, and why did I not finish it. I'm going to go back to Olivia, though, because it's her game.
Yes.
That's a you question, Patrick. That's a you question.
I can't answer that for you, Patrick.
No, I can't answer that one for you either. For me, this was a complete departure from my usual gameplay style, and I found that really interesting that I found this gameplay so compelling. I think the sort of it awoke a completionist in me who found that story, and I am not typically a story person. I actively dislike stories in most games. I'm a story snob and a generally terrible human. But this one, it really grabbed me. It sunk its claws in really quickly, really early. I love all of the shows like, Westworld and the Human show which is currently on Prime now, and it's an English show. All of these sort of questions about ethics and how do we get from this robots-humans divide and how do we bring that closer? And it just really grabbed me. The story. This is a story game. If I was being unkind, I would call it a walking simulator. But it's exactly in the same vein as all of those other games, and it's just a fantastic story. And I really don't want to spoil it for you, Patrick, now that I know you've only played so little of it.
The completionist aspect that you mentioned, I think is brought on by the fact that very cleverly they give you the map of all the choices you could have made during one of the chapters.
Yes.
And it's incredible. Like, I think everyone agrees, if you had told people before they actually experience it that this is what they would want to do, people would have said, but I don't want to know. I want to maintain the illusion of reality and that I don't know what choices, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually play through it, it feels like it's opening up the possibilities instead of restricting them, which is kind of incredible.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that was a surprise to me. That was like what I mean when it as part of me. I feel like I can talk about the very first demo level without being called out for making spoilers.
Sure.
In the very first part of the very first level, when you first walk into this room, you have a story fork there. And I played that demo. Like, I found this like part of me that really wanted to unlock all of the outcomes available from just that very first demo level. And it was a constant piece of frustration to me that I couldn't get this early fork, and it didn't alter an eventual outcome. But my God, I wanted to find it. And you have to rescue the fish. You have to stand there and wait for the fish to fall out of the fish tank and then rescue it. And I eventually figured it out, and I was so happy. And it made no difference. And I was just like, what has this game done to me? And I highly recommend it. I bought it on two platforms now. And I would buy it on Switch. If it came out on Switch, please put it out on Switch. I would buy it on Switch immediately.
And play it again. Joce,
Yes.
It's also on your list, I believe.
It is, yes. And I think for me, the big criticism that I often have with a lot of the titles like Wolf Among Us, Walking Dead, all the things where you're supposed to feel like you're playing through a story and your choices matter and your dialogue matters, but it never really felt like it did. Whereas I think the flowcharts that Detroit gave you was brilliant, because you can see, even though it feels like the first playthrough was like the right playthrough, I would see at the end, after that I'd done my flowchart, to be like, oh my God, there were literally 10 other ways to play this level. And my choices mattered. They made my characters different. Main characters could die. Halfway through, you can lose one of the 3 main characters. It's insane. I have literally never played a dialogue-driven story game like Detroit Become Human. And if you haven't played it, if you hadn't made it all the way through, I couldn't put it down. I played it like 3 days straight. I just like 10 hours at a time, just like, I need to keep going. I need to see how this ends. Like, I just need to do this. And I could not put it down. It deserves all the praise because it was a brilliant story.
Have to get back to
Absolutely agree. Yeah, you have to, Patrick. Like it's rare to me that I would say that to someone. I'm a strong believer that there is no absolute good. Everything is subjective. Everything is opinion based. Every person's experience is different. But my God, this is a good one. And I think it's one of those where, and I don't know if you've played the earlier Quantic games, like the Heavy Rain. Yes, I did. Yeah.
And Beyond Two Souls.
I feel like this, Beyond Two Souls. And I feel like this is like, they've evolved and they've like really figured out how to do this kind of game. And this is their new zenith of like, this is defining what that kind of game can be. And like, it's so good. And I was horrified to lose someone. I'm not spoilers. But to your point of you can lose the main 3, yeah, I did. And I was just like, oh my God. Wow. Like,
and the story keeps going. It's not like
Yes.
they're like, oh, okay, you killed a main character, like restart. It's like, no, like, okay, so that person doesn't exist in the world anymore. What does that world look like? And the game just carries on. And it feels so interesting and realistic because they're able to build a story that can do that, where you can have these crazy swings and like what happens if a person like lives or dies and what does the world look like. And they actually dove into that question. It was just, it was amazing. And I think that's more to your point of not actually playing through more than a couple hours. I did feel like there was like a breaking point with this game after they kind of introduced the characters and then finally kind of the story gets underway. It takes, I think, about 2 chapters with each of the main characters before the story really kind of ramps up. So maybe that's what you're experiencing, is just like the beginning where they're introducing the ideas in the world is a little bit slow, but it picks up very quickly after that.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think we mentioned it enough, but this year is so, I thought 2017 couldn't be topped. I don't think 2018 tops it, but there are just so many games, so many great games. I'm like Ed was saying earlier, I can't, decide which ones to play, and some of them just, but I'll have to get back to it, I guess. All right, so that's your list. Let's move on to, so we had Warhammer Vermintide 2, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Subnautica, and Detroit Become Human, which, by the way, I love how the enthusiasms you guys bring to all of these titles, because each of them I want to play, and those that I've already played, I want to go play them again. It's I love how awesome games are nowadays. All right, Jeff, what is your full list, and then we'll talk about the games.
Well, I didn't think I would have to talk about God of War because I figured somebody else was going to talk about God of War. But it turns out this is a very eclectic group of opinions, which I love, and I've loved the games we've talked about so far. I didn't expect. That's cool. But God of War, I think, is the best game of the year for me, and for the myriad reasons. I think it is. It really
just
pushes.
Give us your full list, and then we'll get back to each game because I'm sure everyone has opinions about each one.
Oh, okay. Subnautica, Spider-Man, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Astrobot Rescue Mission, and God of War.
All right, in no particular order.
No, in a very particular order.
Oh, okay.
That was 5-1.
Okay,
yeah, I think that God of War for me was the best game of the year. I think it's the game that pushes the genre, that pushes the industry forward in really interesting ways. The decision to have the game be one continuous shot that never is edited is extraordinary. It was very difficult. It's seemingly inconsequential, but it was everything for me. I think the story is told with such artistry. I cried playing it. I mean, I am a father of a son. It is a game about fathers and sons, and so I'm, I guess, more inclined to have it resonate with me. But I think it is beautifully told. It is one of the most visually impressive video games ever made, and I think that would probably be enough. But the underlying game mechanics are the best combat I have ever played in a video game. It is the best combat in a third-person action game I have ever played. Tons of options all the time. Thrilling, never boring, constantly evolving. A huge game with tons to do, awe-inspiring moments, a great relationship with NPCs. It has everything, and I'm in awe of it. It is my game of the year, and it probably is easily my top 3 games of all time.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's definitely in my game of the year's list as well, and I guess it's just the two of us because everyone else didn't play it, which is kind of mind-blowing, and I'm also very happy about because it's a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But
I have to interject, Patrick. I did play it.
Right.
I played a lot of it, and I really didn't like it.
Didn't like it.
Fair enough.
I understand how people could not like it because, you don't like AAA open-ish world experiences because they're a little bit too commonplace. But unless that's a factor for you, it's such an amazingly realized game and world, and it seems like everything is just right. Not, I don't know, like when you're talking about, I'm saying open-ish world, because it's not like it litters your entire map with tons of stuff to do. It's just right. It has enough stuff to do to keep you motivated, to go take you on distractions if you want to, but still keep the thing coherent and manageable. The story might be a little bit too long. They could have chopped off maybe 5 hours out of it, I guess, but I still enjoyed all of it, and it's one of the very few games where when I finished the story, I kept going to kill all of the Valkyries, because I just enjoyed the gameplay of it so much. I mean, the axe is one of the best weapons in any video game ever, and following up on the Chains of Olympus, which were also an incredibly emblematic weapon of the world of gaming, was no small feat, and they managed, and it feels so visceral. And Olivia, you were talking about how good Vermintide feels earlier. For me, God of War has that same kind of brutal feeling feedback that makes you that immerses you into the game, and it's kind of an amazing accomplishment of what games can be today. It's of course one type of game, but it's kind of the top of the game of that type of game. And I think we also should mention, and I'm curious to get you guys' and girls' thought of this maybe even more. God of War was such an adolescent, a teenager game. It came in a time where it was like, haha, you can, get in the bath with the naked ladies, and Kratos was angry all the time and killing and blood and with no deeper reflection or meaning. And in a meta way, this game is kind of a commentary on what it was before, with Kratos living this life behind and being much more mature, and the themes, or maybe not the themes, but at least the way it approaches its story is incredibly different from the way it did in the previous games. And that alone is kind of maybe in the same way that Tomb Raider rebooted the franchise, God of War also is rebooting that entire series in an incredibly satisfying way. So I'm curious if that, spoke to you in any way, Jocelyn and Olivia, but for me, it was definitely an achievement.
Yeah, I think for me it was, I think that, I have this sort of difficult dissonance with this game, because everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, excuse me, I can totally see that. And I can totally sympathize with that. And it's hard to disagree with anything you're saying about this game. And, when I watch the VGAs and when I've seen other people have these same conversations, I've had the same reaction of like, yeah, I can see how that's accurate. But it drove me crazy. I just couldn't. I wanted to like it. I wanted to love it. And I wanted to have that feeling of that like happiness and that like the value that you're talking about. But I couldn't engage with it. It was so, and I think it's part of the problem with that God of War had for me was actually 2017, the year in games, where you had so many games, and this is sort of, slight political thing. So apologies for that, all the people who don't like hearing about that. But there were so many games where I could see myself represented in the game and have all of that good stuff. And to me, then that kind of has raised the bar for those games of like, I want to be able to be powerful and to have compelling story. And I want to be able to see myself represented in games. And after 2017, we've had so many good proof of concepts of that I can have all of that. I can, as a lady who loves playing video games.
So now you want it.
Now I want it. That's the new bar. Horizon Zero Dawn is the new bar for me. Well, Horizon Zero Dawn and many other games are the new bar for me.
Joce is clapping.
That was my game of the year from last year. So yeah nothing will ever top that.
I think it might have been mine as well. Horizon was incredible.
It was. And I think that to me is why I think it's not that God of War isn't a stellar game. It's that it's not I don't have that feeling of representation. I don't have that feeling of excitement. And additionally, just as an aside, the kid drove me freaking crazy. I was like, that was one of my earliest memories from like picking up that game. It's like, can I just leave it to die? Can I just carry on without it? Is that an option?
I was going to say this is an accurate representation of what it is to actually have a kid, but that was when you were saying the kid drove me crazy, not the second part of your.
Not the
I feel that about my real kid. You never thought that about your real kid? Give it a couple of years.
All right. So, Joce, unless you want to add something, I think we can move on.
I'm good.
You're good. So, Subnautica, we already talked about. Spider-Man is also a game that I think is worthy of praise. I know, Jeff, you're, according to the consecrated phrase, a Marvel zombie from way back. And obviously, you loved Spider-Man.
Yes, it is. It's sublime to be able to swing around like Spider-Man, and I think the storytelling is better than most of the Spider-Man films. And it's all about swinging through that city, man. They nailed that, and there's so much fun stuff to do in that game. It's an amazing thing to have a year in video games where a game that good is that low on my list, but there we are.
I think the first moment when you swing through the city, like the screen shows you Spider-Man swinging, and then it slows down and it says press R2, and you start swinging yourself. It's like, oh my God, I'm actually going to be doing this, like controlling it in that way. It's what everyone said, it puts you in the costume yourself and makes you feel like Spider-Man. It's the most contrived way of describing the game at this point, but it's true. And I think the one thing I didn't expect, it's also on my list, by the way. The thing I didn't expect was the story, which you mentioned. It takes a little while to pick up, but especially when you've completed it, it is an emotional thing, and the characters have grown on you, and these versions of those characters that are incredibly well realized, and those takes are just as valid as any other take you've seen in any other medium, in any movie, in any comic. And the love that they have for the series is kind of shines through. It's kind of crazy year for Spider-Man between this and Into the Spider-Verse, which is a really good movie as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Jeff, on this again. It's crazy that this game is kind of almost an afterthought in people's favorite games of the year, and that's a testament to the quality of this year.
Yeah, it's great.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey we talked about as well. Astrobot Rescue Mission, I played through half of this. It's a PlayStation VR game, and it's on your list. A VR game is one of your favorite games of the year.
Number 2.
One of 2? Oh, Subnautica, right, because you can see.
Well, I said number 2. Number 2.
Oh, number 2, sorry.
My second favorite game of the year.
Incredible.
Yeah, and I think there's a very real argument that it's the best game of the year. I think it's extraordinary.
Most people are never going to play this game.
That's a shame. That's a real shame.
Most people don't have a PlayStation.
I've never even heard of this game.
But
what is this game?
It's a platformer on PlayStation VR, a Sony exclusive platformer on PlayStation VR. It kind of grew out of a tech demo that shipped with the PlayStation VR when it first launched. That was just sort of a proof of concept of some ideas of what a platformer may be like. And the tech demo was so cool that they grew it into its own game and absolutely knocked it out of the park. I have said numerous times on my show that if this game had a Nintendo logo on it and starred Mario instead of the little Astrobot, everybody would be saying it was Game of the Year, and everybody would be saying VR is the future. Nintendo nailed it. They figured it out. This is Game of the Year. But it's flying under everybody's radar because it's an IP that nobody knows or cares about, and it's on PlayStation VR exclusively. So, but it is one of the best platformers I've ever played. It is constantly throwing new, fantastic ideas at you. It uses VR in a way I've never seen anybody use it. I mean, there are other VR platformers, Lucky's Tale, for example. But this embraces VR. It places the action all around you and is constantly inventing new thrilling ways to have you interact with the environment. It's gorgeous. It's the most fun I've had playing a video game all year. Pure fun, pure joy. This game.
It makes you smile.
Yeah.
I think that's the game that made me hope that Sony isn't giving up on VR and that they will release whatever their next console is with a VR headset as an option. I'm not saying VR is definitely going to be here to stay, but I want them to keep going at it because they're getting to a point where it has value that nothing else has. I like this game very much as well. Ed, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so I haven't played it because I don't have a VR headset, but I'm getting one for Christmas, so I will be playing it before the end of the year, and it's obviously in contention for my favorite games of the year. But I will say that from people I've observed playing it and listening to them talk about it, they say that it is a powerful VR experience and one that kind of helps make you realize why VR could be something in the future. There's a couple other games that have come out recently, or not even recently, but come out for VR that are like this, like Super Hot VR is an example, Beat Saber, stuff like that. But Astrobot, Astrobot is a magical experience. But like Jeff said, it's only for PSVR. So there is, I will just go ahead and mention that there is the $200 PSVR with Moss and Astrobot bundle. It's back for the Christmas season. So if that's something you're interested in, then feel free to go pick it up from that.
And Moss is wonderful as well. It's
a very charming game for sure.
Yeah,
I think you guys in the US are the ones who get that bundle. We don't in Europe, and that's a shame because it's the one I would recommend. I think for $200, if you're in the very slightest way curious about VR, then that is the one to get. If you have a PlayStation 4, of course. So, yeah, it's a game that that takes advantage of VR in a way that few others do. I've played Moss. I didn't love it. I thought it was just you were just observing thing. What Astrobot does is that it creates concepts. You keep referencing Nintendo about this game, Jeff, and it does the same gameplay innovations that Nintendo does that make people go, oh, this is so clever and fun, which very few other developers manage to implement in their games. So I agree. It's kind of an amazing game. I don't go quite as far as you do in its praise, but it's definitely something to give a try if you're interested. And I think that's it. I mean, we talked about Assassin's Creed Odyssey already. So let's move on to Jocelyn. What are your favorite games of the year?
Well, we've already talked about two of them. So we talked about Detroit Become Human as well as Subnautica, which were definitely on my list. But I found and it might have been a little bit of burnout from 2017 because there were so many games to play that were these big, massive experiences. I found in 2018, I kind of went a little bit more into the smaller experiences, the indie titles, that kind of stuff. So I'm really
hoping you're going to say something that I hope you're going to say. Keep going.
Oh, no. Now I'm worried I've picked the wrong one. But I really enjoyed Frostpunk.
Yeah.
Overcooked.
So depressing,
too.
though.
I literally just gasped, Jocelyn. I literally was just like...
I love that game too, but I found it so depressing.
It's definitely this apocalyptic dystopian type alternate past. It's not even future. So but it was I thought it was really fun. But then Overcooked 2 is another one. And then my final one is actually Sea of Thieves, which I'm expecting to have to defend the crud out of. But bear with me.
So who else has played Frostpunk in this group?
Me.
Yeah, me.
Oh wow, those were not enthusiastic me's.
That was for me.
Olivia, you have to go pretty soon, so can you tell us what you thought about Frostpunk?
I'm beginning to think that Jocelyn and I are actually soulmates. So I loved Frostpunk. I loved the world. I loved the art. I loved the style. I didn't find it depressing. Maybe it's because of, my being English, we're a bit more of a low key group of humans. So maybe our bar for depressing is a little bit different.
Well, you also are on record as wanting to abandon a child.
That is true.
Those are the kind of decisions that you make all the time in Frostpunk.
If only the people
Just get off my back.
Yeah.
And I think I loved the it felt very Dickensian to me. It felt very, I don't know. I loved it. The same sort of it could have been a Shackleton. Sorry, I'm referencing a lot of historical stuff. I loved the historic vibe of the game. Is I think what I'm really saying. I loved the difficult decisions. I loved the prioritization. It's a kind of a foray into. I've only played a couple of similar genre games to Frostpunk, and so it's kind of a new move into that space for me. I definitely had a couple of friends who were more experienced with them saying that it was far too easy. Being a noob, I didn't suffer from that at all. I think the thing that I loved the most of it was sort of the art style and the feeling of trying to survive in an oppressive world.
That seems like I was with you up until that point. The stress of this makes me. I almost wanted to go buy it, and then I'm like, maybe not. I'm gonna go back to Joce because it's her game. But you have to go, Olivia. Before you leave, I want to ask you one question. Have you played Celeste?
I have not played Celeste. No.
All right.
I've watched other people play it a great deal. The ultra difficult platformer, I'm not a very patient person and I get frustrated very easily. So I tend not to touch them. So haven't.
Well, I won't. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I think there might be something in it for you. Anyway, we'll talk about that then. But you have to go. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us and sharing your very eclectic selection. Do you want to tell people where they can find you if they want to get in
absolutely.
touch?
Thank you so much for having me, Patrick. It's always a pleasure to come with you guys, and I really enjoy hanging out with this wider group of amazing podcasters. And thank you for having little old me, who really doesn't do anything in the content creation space anymore. So I really appreciate the invite, and it's been great to meet Jocelyn and Jeff and Ed as well. I can be found on Twitter at Olivia D. Grace, and on Twitch at Olivia, and on Instagram at Olivia D. Grace. And those are really the only places I put anything anymore. So don't go hunting for me elsewhere. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure and really great to meet you. I'm looking forward to listening to the rest of this podcast when it's posted so I can hear everything everyone else has to say.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'll include the link to your Twitter account in the show notes, of course. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. So getting back to Frostpunk and Joce, why do you love being depressed so much, I guess is the question.
I feel like maybe I see this as more like hopeful. I don't know. I never felt depressed playing this. It's like, so the idea of this, it's like a city building survival kind of strategy type game where you have to like manage your resources, and your most basic resource
some of which being apparently children, which you have to sacrifice to keep growing your city, if I understand correctly. So yeah,
well, you don't have to, and that's kind of the point, is that you make laws that will impact the way your city will run and grow. So you can, decide to help refugees or not help refugees because you don't have as many resources. You can put children to work in the mine, and you can do those things, but you don't have to do those things. You can build your city in a different way so that you don't have to make those super hard decisions, and you don't have to resort to child labor. And so there is a lot of strategy to it. And the whole idea is you are the last group of survivors from in 1886. So it's all very, I can't tell from the name, it's all very steampunky. And you have moved north where the British have apparently stored a lot of coal, and you're using this like last-ditch effort generator to try to build a city around. And the idea is that after this volcanic eruption, the whole entire world has been engulfed in this winter, and you have to try to survive the extreme cold, which is another, it's kind of the driving force behind the game is the cold. So it will get warmer and colder over a cycle, and you can see the weather coming. And so you have to try to make sure that you've built your city big enough to support everyone, but small enough that you can still heat it. So it was the really cool like push and pull. And they also launched it with 3 different scenarios. So in the first scenario, you're very much just attempting to build the new London, basically. And you do have to make your decisions and everything else, but it's fairly straightforward. It's just, like survive until after the massive storm. But the other 2 scenarios it launched with are really interesting, where you have a group of scholars that you have to attempt to keep power and heat to 3 different arcs they're basically full of seeds. So the idea is that once the planet warms up again, you have all of the seeds that you'll need to like restart the ecosystems. So you have to make sure, again, you're like managing 3 separate areas that you have to keep heated. And then finally, you have a refugee scenario where you have to constantly be either accepting or not of all these different refugees. And you have to try to basically grow your civilization as big as you possibly can without running out of resources. So I think it launched with a really strong system and really strong scenarios that played through and felt very different. And then they even did one more scenario that they released, I think, in September that was, again, a totally different way to play the game that involved you essentially taking over a city that had failed. So you discovered this other city, and you had to, like, the inhabitants had killed their leader and were like, well, now what do we do? And you take over and kind of like try to fix all of the mistakes already. So the fact that they gave out a free DLC of another scenario, I think was also something that should be recognized. And I had a great time. I thought it was challenging, and it was another game that I couldn't put down.
You make a good case for it. I think the only thing that would still make me not want to play it is the fact that maybe it's a genre game which I don't really enjoy. But yeah, it seems like there's more to it than I initially thought. So, Jeff, why don't you like good games?
City buildings are not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
I hope that you didn't misunderstand what I said. I thought the game was excellent. I played a lot of it.
Okay.
I found it very depressing and very, I mean, maybe I'm just not as good a player, but I constantly found myself having to make the decision to like serve my people garbage or let them die of starvation. It's like no good decision there, no way to avoid horrible things to my people.
All right.
It's a very melancholy world. And as much as I appreciate it, I love the art and I like games like that, but, at a certain point, I'm just like, booting it up just made me feel bummed out.
I have to double Jocelyn's praise of the post-launch support that this game has gotten, because all those scenarios that she was talking about, they're all free. Like, they just come with the game. So, definitely
and when you
high
say
praise
scenarios,
for that.
it's like different modes of
yeah. So
playing
like
the
this is
game.
the
Yeah,
base.
they're like
There's the original story mode, basically, where you go through X number of days in order to survive. And then the other scenarios are kind of like, they're also kind of survival things, but they have a different twist on the way that the story is like trying to be told. So like the seeds thing, like if you power down your generator in order to save coal or whatever, and the arcs get too cold, then you fail, right? So it's just kind of different
wind conditions.
Yeah,
Right,
wind conditions,
okay.
exactly, yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I should give it another look. We'll see. Although I kind of live in Frostpunk land. Now it started snowing a couple of days ago, and essentially it's pretty wonderful when you look at it from inside, but it's also terrifyingly cold. And I guess it's the spirit of Christmas. It's
a
real
nice
one.
60 degrees in Austin, Texas right now, Patrick.
I hate you a little bit. Overcooked 2 is also on your list, Joce. it's, I guess, Overcooked 1, but more of it?
So I never played Overcooked 1, so maybe that's why I thought this game kind of came out of left field. But I had a friend just kind of say to me, he's like, oh, because it came out, I played it on the Switch. And so he's like, oh, a new game came out. Do you want to try it? Did you try Overcooked? Do you want to try 2 with me? And I was like, oh, I've literally never heard of this. Let's see what this is. And I have not had so much fun and laughed so much in a multiplayer game as I have in this, because basically, if you're unfamiliar with Overcooked, you have very simplistic recipes, usually having a couple of ingredients that have to go through certain stages of chopping or cooking or whatever. But you have to kind of fill orders in a restaurant. Sounds very mobile gamey, right? But when you get on voice with a friend and you have to manage different sections of the kitchen, you're like throwing tomatoes at each other, and you'll both have plates with rice on it, but nobody's made the fish. And I don't know. I just I had some of the most hilarious moments that I've had in gaming this year happened playing Overcooked 2 with friends. And it's still super fun if you're playing solo, but it has physics where you can actually like your person has weight. So you can bump into people and throw them off their course and stuff, and you get in each other's way. And it makes for a hilariously challenging experience playing Overcooked 2 with friends.
Yeah, so Overcooked 2, the main changes that they added were the ability to throw food. You couldn't do that before as well. You could kind of run and then throw, and then your momentum would carry the food, but now you can actually throw it. And that's that is a mechanic that they've shaped their kitchen design around, the ability to throw
there's
things.
times you're riding down a river on 2 separate rafts, and you have to throw the ingredients to the other raft so they can chop it, and they have to throw it back so you can cook it. So
and then the online play completely that's also completely new to Overcooked 2. Before you had to do couch co-op.
And I guess
it really changes the game for me personally, because now I can play with my friends that live in Seattle or whatever and stuff like that. And before I had to the only time we could play is
you had to drive
together.
To Seattle, so that wasn't
yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the big if they manage. I'll confess I've played a little bit of Overcooked 2 and not none of Overcooked 1, but if they've managed to replicate the experience of being with your friends on a couch over the internet, it's not an easy thing to do. If they manage to do it, then this is kind of an incredible achievement on its own.
It's worse actually, because you're yelling at each other over voice chat. Yeah, you're yelling at each other over voice chat. I mean, the listeners, if we all talk at the same time, they couldn't understand any of us. And that is how you communicate when you're playing Overcooked 1 on the couch. And now you have to deal with that over voice chat. And so it's worse but better.
Yeah.
Do you have it on Switch or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I have it on Switch, and then I also actually bought it on PC as well because I wanted to stream it because it was so entertaining.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I bought it twice.
So on Switch, can you use the mic from the Switch, or do you have to use that stupid app?
I think you have to just. I would just completely forgo the app and just use Discord or whatever.
Yeah. I used
so that's what you did in that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just had my phone on the couch next to me, and then I was just plugged into my phone and using Discord.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
Exactly.
All right. So the last game is also a very social one. It's Sea of Thieves. How come you like this game that apparently no one in the world enjoys? Or I guess that's not a fair characterization. I think a lot of people do enjoy it, but it was a disappointment for many other people. It's on your list, so you love it.
It is, and I thought that I should put this on here because exactly everything that you just said, the way you characterize Sea of Thieves, Patrick, is exactly why I thought I should mention it, because
you're saying I'm the problem, essentially. Patrick, you're the problem.
The internet is the problem.
Okay, that we can all get behind.
Yes. So I think with Sea of Thieves on launch, it wasn't all that it could be, and it was very disappointing because a lot of people had built it up to have a lot more than it did. I think anyone who was able to get into the beta or had been paying attention to kind of the launch cycle of it and everything everyone was talking to, if you were paying attention, you knew what to expect. But I don't think a lot of people were necessarily paying attention to it until Microsoft started with the Game Pass hype machine. And it was the first AAA title that was going to be on the Game Pass, and you could get in there and play with your friends and be a pirate, and it's amazing and it's huge and all this stuff. And people got in there and it felt huge but empty. And the gameplay loop was fun and more fun with friends, and it was very social, which is what they were originally going for. But once the first person made it to Pirate Legend, which happened extraordinarily fast because it was a Twitch streamer that essentially got carried. And so once the first person hit Pirate Legend and then there was no extra gameplay there, a lot of people fell off the game, myself included, because it was like, well, there's nothing to grind for. It was a huge grind fest. There weren't a lot of ways to actually earn reputation to level up all three of your factions. So it was very, very difficult to progress in the game. And then once you actually got there, there was nothing to do. So a lot of people fell off of it. And I think when it comes to Game of the Year, and the reason that I think that this is probably my Game of the Year is because they listened to the community, and you could really tell that Rare felt bad for letting the community down, because they took a development cycle that they were planning on releasing over 2 years and condensed it down into about 8 months. And they've now released, I believe, 4 major content patches, as well as they have in-game events every couple of weeks. And the game now in December feels like if they had launched the December version of the game in March, then it probably would be everyone's Game of the Year. What is in there now is a fully fleshed out, fully realized game that's packed full of threats that are like NPC type threats, but are much more challenging than they were when they're first released. They packed the game full of rewards. So it's a lot easier to level up than it used to be, but not in a way that feels like they're just handing it to you. Like, you still have to actively play. And then you also have alliances that they added to the game. So you can actually have like a fleet of ships now, but it's not oppressive because I also can't, like, if let's say, Patrick, you and I are on a ship and then Ed and Jeff are on another ship, we can't queue into the same server. So you have to make alliances with whoever happens to be on your server. And so you meet a lot of new people. Like you mentioned, it's a social game. You can like meet a lot of new people, create alliances, go into things and all be flying the same flags and have a whole fleet. But it's not oppressive because I can't go in with a pre-made group of like 20 people on 10 ships. So I think they've made a lot of really great improvements to the game, but a lot of people haven't gone back to it to take a second look because the launch was so terrible. But I think that the game that they offer now is worth a second look.
That's fair enough. Is it a game you can play solo, or is that not even an option?
You can, yes. Playing solo is an option, but
yes, it's an option,
but
more
difficult. Yes,
but is it fun? Is it as fun?
I enjoy it because again, I feel like I get the same feeling in Sea of Thieves when I'm playing solo that I got in Subnautica. That kind of like, I'm always looking over my shoulder. I'm always a little bit anxious because it's a PvP all the time game. You can't opt out of PvP. Even when you form an allegiance with someone, you can break that allegiance and shoot them. Like it's still a PvP game, which I think adds, for me, I am more of a competitive gamer. I tend to like PvP experiences. PvP is my favorite part of WoW, which not a lot of people say that. So I think that like as a more competitive person, I like the fact that PvP is always there because it increases my excitement in the game. So you can play solo, but it can be very challenging because even the ship that you play solo on is better crewed with 2 people. So you have to know the mechanics and you have to know where things are on your ship and you have to be pretty quick. So it's a more challenging way to play, but it's definitely doable. I play solo.
All right.
None of my friends want to go back to it. But I'm telling you, it's worth going back to. It's a beautiful game.
It's the story of half the games of the internet nowadays. They launch incomplete and then the developers keep working on them. I mean, everyone was doing the comparison with Sea of No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky.
Yeah. Which is its own bag of potatoes. But yeah, it feels like this is how things are way too often, But unfortunately, I guess developers are going to wisen up to it because people don't go back to their games once they've been completed after release, if it was too lackluster at launch. So, yeah, but I guess it's another game. The other thing is it's on Game Pass. So if you ever end up getting Game Pass, you can go check it out.
Yeah, you can try it for free.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, for the price of the Game
Well,
Pass.
for Game Pass, but yeah.
All right, so 3 of my games have already been mentioned. I'm kind of hoping and not hoping that Ed will mention the other 2, but we'll see how it goes. Which are your 5 favorite games, Ed?
Yeah, so I'm going to go through from top to bottom, I guess. So Thronebreaker, The Witcher Tales.
Okay.
Celeste.
Okay.
Which I know I'm stealing from you, Patrick. Into the Breach. Return of the Obra Dinn. And
nice.
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Wow.
I feel like I'm Jeff. I feel like I'm Jeff, where I have to justify Red Dead Redemption 2 to everyone because no one else likes it, like you had to do with God of War. But yeah,
it's Red Dead Redemption. I'm really glad at least someone is mentioning it. It's not in my list. I'm glad someone is mentioning it because how can we not? It's incredible that it's not at least on some of our lists. But I mean, we'll talk about it in a little bit. But Thronebreaker,
Gwent story mode, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a card game. It's a card game of. Is it allowed? Because Gwent came out last year?
It's a completely separate standalone game, though.
I guess it is. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, Gwent in Witcher 3 was pretty easy. If you had the very easily formed deck could just wipe the floor with everyone. They changed the rules, and I think it reflects in the multiplayer game too. But so it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more slower paced. It's a little bit more building up your combos to the point where you can do things. So but the game itself, there's what I like so much about it is the story is really fantastic. The choices that you have to make about who you have recruited into your army, and then their reactions to the choices that you make are really powerful and ripples down the rest. There's 5 chapters in the game. I made a choice in chapter 2 that I didn't expect at all to affect anything in chapter 3, just because it's the character that was involved was not part of the main story beats at that point, and it was just completely blew my mind when something happened, and I ended up having to make that person leave my army because it was just so appalling what they did. I've heard
a lot of people say it's essentially a Witcher game, but it's just a card game. But that's
it's 100% a Witcher game, except instead of being an action RPG, it's a card game instead. The main gameplay loop is a card game. The most of the card games that you play are actually not the standard Gwent that you would play in the multiplayer. Most of them are actually story missions that are shortened, so you only have 1 round to win, or puzzle missions where you're given a custom deck and you have to figure out which order to play the cards and where in order to beat them. So that is actually really satisfying when you're scratching your head over and over again, and then you manage to do things in just the right order to just completely wipe the floor with the enemies. So I find those satisfying. I find the story really, really compelling and interesting. If you are a fan of the Witcher books, it's all about Queen Maeve and her the way she travels through the different areas. And she's a very compelling character as well.
So yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I think it's really interesting that we're getting so many different games from everyone. The next one though, I will have a lot to say about, and that's Celeste.
Mm-hmm.
You can start.
So Celeste,
I'll
Celeste is a tough platformer. It is somewhat frustrating. I would say the main story sections, progressing through the game, is not super frustrating. You can get to very more hard traversal in some of the B-sides and stuff like that, which are the mirror levels in so many words. But the the thing I really like about Celeste is the progression of the character and how she deals with like real mental illness and how the game like talks about mental illness. And having it be on this backdrop of this very difficult platformer, like made me think about how I feel about when I get enraged at games and stuff like that, you know? So it's kind of like weirdly like prophetic how the gameplay loop and the story kind of loop in on each other. But yeah, it's a very powerful game that sends a very powerful message towards mental illness, which is something I really like about it.
Yeah, I think even saying mental illness, I don't know if that's because I'm French and it feels like something a lot more heavy than you know it can be. It can be. I mean, obviously, mental illness is never fun, but it's just things that all of us deal with from time to time, and it's just things like insecurity, depression. Everyone goes through moments of stuff like that. So, Celeste talks about this, and in the same way talks to everyone. I can't express how incredible this game is. This is my game of the year, period, and it's a perfect synergy between the theme of a game and its gameplay. It's more than just synergy. It's like they are the same thing. The theme of the game is, and the narration of the game, the story of the game is its gameplay, and vice versa. And the difference, I think, with many other difficult platformers is that this game is incredibly wholesome and hopeful and helpful, and it loves its players. So many of those games, those difficult games, I think one has to mention Dark Souls, seem to revel in the in almost a sadistic way in the failures of their players. And this game is the opposite of that. It starts with, I think the first words that are displayed on screen are, "You can do this." And this is a message about Madeline, the protagonist in Celeste, and you as a player. And I just, for context, I don't like these games usually. I'm not a big fan of pixel art. I'm not a big fan at all of difficult platformers. And I'm not a big fan of hard games, period. And I loved this game because it encouraged me. And I almost, I would love for everyone to experience this game. And I actually think out of everyone I know, Jeff, you are someone that would enjoy this game even more because it feels like it corresponds to some of your philosophy of being positive and being helpful and being I don't know exactly how to put it, but this is a game that wants you to succeed, that wants to be your friend and wants to be helpful to you. And the crazy thing is that because of it, you manage and you do it. And I can't remember if you tried it at all, Jeff. But if you did and you stopped playing, I think you should try again. Essentially,
I have to admit I have not really engaged with Celeste. I admire it. I work in an office with a bunch of people who got really obsessive about that game and played it constantly, talked about it constantly, played it in front of me constantly. I admire it. I like watching people play it. I think it's a beautiful game. I think it's an inspiring game. It is not my jam at all. It's just not, and I can recognize that it's just not for me. It's right. And I think it's an excellent, well-crafted. It's certainly a labor of love. You can tell that just by watching it, just by looking at it. But I know me, and I'm not going to. I have no desire to play it.
I think the reason I'm so in love with it is that it's one of those games that I thought wasn't my jam, that I knew wasn't my jam, and I played it a little bit anyway, and it brought me in. It's that wholesomeness that I keep talking about that welcomed me in and that encouraged me. And I'm never one that would, it's like Madeline has to climb a mountain. And for me, these types of games are mountains that I look at and I'm like, F you, I don't need that crap. I don't have time or I don't want to waste my joy of living trying to do something super hard for the sake of doing it. And that game, because of the way it's crafted, managed to make me do it and to enjoy it more than it didn't really frustrate me. It was just, when you fail at some point, it's a little bit annoying, but you want to keep going and you progress a little bit more every time. I don't know. It worked on me so well. And from a game design crafting point of view, the way it mixes its narrative and its gameplay are incredible. And I was talking about playing a female character earlier when we were talking about Assassin's Creed. This is another example, and Horizon before it. I think all of these games are making it okay for me to not okay, that's a harsh way of saying it, but I'm okay playing as a character different from me, and I think that's also making me in a little way a better human being. And Madeline in this game is so lovable and admirable as a person, and she's a bunch of pixels that is crafted so well that she gets a soul. I can't say everyone's probably tired of hearing me rave about this game, but I can't say enough good things about it. It's an incredible experience, and even if you don't like these games, I would highly encourage you to at least give it a try, because it's a game that I think I will never forget. It's an amazing piece of art. All right, so that's Celeste for me. As you can guess, it's my game of the year. Into the Breach is your third one.
Yeah, so this is the makers of FTL. They created a small chess game that is not chess. It's all with robots that attack each other, attack little bugs and stuff like that. But the way it's a strategy game, but all the grid is very small. It's like max 8x8 maybe. And but the way you kind of, once you figure out the systems of the game and how you can influence it, you end up making one move that can hit a guy into a rock, which will break a dam, and then the dam will flood part of the map with water, and then some of the bugs will drown. It's stuff like that as you progress through the game and you get more and more used to how the game works, you're like, I'm losing really bad. There's no way I can win this match. It's almost over for me. If I lose all my power, I'm gonna die and have to start over. And then you see that one move that you can make that will completely change the result of the match, and then it just completely you win, and then you go on to the next level. And the game is very difficult. Play on easy at the beginning. Don't be afraid of playing on easy. Like FTL, you played on easy the first time, but the game is very satisfying to play and very fulfilling when you successfully put all the best laid plans and put them into effect.
I've heard so many good things about this game. Maybe I have it. Maybe I should play it in easy. And that's actually another thing that Celeste does so well. Telling you it's okay to play in easy and in assist mode. But maybe I should. I usually don't. And I didn't.
This game
Celeste,
is intended to play on easy at the beginning, because you have to learn the mechanics of the game before normal is even a possibility for you.
Fair enough. Okay, so, maybe I'll give it another try then. Maybe when it comes out on Switch, because I now wait for everything.
On Switch.
Oh, it is. Well, I guess I have to buy it again.
For a couple months. Yeah, that's how I play it. I played it on the bus on the way to work. It takes me 15 minutes to ride the bus to work, and in that time, I can play like 2 or 3 rounds of this game. And it's awesome.
A switchable game. One more.
Yeah.
Return of the Obra Dinn, which could be a switchable game, I suppose. What is your opinion of that game?
Obviously, I very very highly opinionated about this game since I put it in my top 5 for the year. But this game is really cool.
Actually, yeah, sorry. Another one has to leave us. I'm sorry.
I apologize.
No, it's my fault. I did say 2 hours, and we are at the 2-hour mark already. You are a dad, and you have to do dad stuff, which I understand because I'm also a dad. So thanks for being on, Jeff. In spite of
it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's so fun listening to everybody's lists, and I'm so delighted by all the variety. Really cool.
We'll decide on, well, actually, we won't be able to decide on one game for all of us. But if people want to hear more discussions from you about games and movies and other stuff, where should they go?
I do a podcast called DLC. You can find that at 5by5.tv/DLC.
Excellent. And your Game of the Year episode is coming up soon. So if you want more of that.
Very soon. Yes, we're recording it very soon.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Go be a dad.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Yeah, those episodes always go long. I wonder why. I mean, you would think, we'll talk about this again, I'm sure, but you would think that we would have at least a couple of games in common, all of us, in our list, but there's almost no games in common. All right, so Return of the Obra Dinn, go ahead.
Yeah, so the way the game begins is you are a insurance investigator essentially, and your job is to go onto the ship that has returned from being at sea 5 years late than it was supposed to, and your job is to figure out what happened on the boat. As far as gameplay mechanics are concerned, you are supposed to identify each person on the boat by their name, how they died, and potentially who killed them.
It's essentially Clue.
But
I have literally never heard of this, but it sounds so freaking cool.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
So have you guys played Papers, Please, or at least heard of Papers, Please?
Yes,
it's by the same guy.
Yeah, Toby.
It's by the same guy.
Okay.
So he is a master class at storytelling and presentation through the way of gameplay, in such a way that man. So the way you unlock.
Oh, I said Toby Fox. What am I saying? It's Undertale. Toby Fox is Undertale.
Yeah.
It's God, I can't remember.
It's that guy. It's that guy.
Oh my God, how can I forget? Okay, go ahead. I'll Google
Lucas
it.
Pope.
Lucas Pope. There you go. They both have names that sound kind of like the same.
So the way you discover how people die is you have a little pocket watch that'll allow you to see the exact moment of their death. So in a picture form, so a still frame of the exact moment of their death, and then you get to hear only audio of people talking before they die.
You say in picture form, it's a freeze frame that you can move around in. So
yes, you move around inside of it, and you get to zoom in on people's eyes and or faces and identify them on the little picture that you get in your little book, your little journal. But seriously, this game is magical because figuring out how people die is pretty easy, right? Like the very first body that you look at is someone shoots him. So you're like, okay, this guy shot him, right? That's how he died. I love
how they throw you a softball at the beginning to make you feel real good about yourself.
But it's identifying the people that's the hard part. So the only way you have to identifying people is by people calling them by name, either in the scene where they die or some other completely unrelated scene. Or it's basically process of elimination. And the way you figure it out is by the clothes they're wearing, the people that they hang out with, there
are names as well, like
the
the wife who kept her maiden name and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
so it's
right. So the way it works is that after you get 3 fates correctly and their names correctly, they get locked in, and so you know that is who they are 100%. But the sound effect that happens when you unlock it is very satisfying because it you just you select a name or whatever to that final lock in, and the whole game freezes for a second, and then it pops up and goes, "Good job, you figure out 3 people, and then it goes through, it flips you through the book and locks in every single one by one. It's really cool and really satisfying, the feedback loop that you get when you unlock things. But yeah, it's a powerful game. It gets creepy at times. It gets kind of downright scary at times, despite the fact that you are completely safe the whole time because it's just a freeze frame of people's death. But
that's there was a game that I played. It was the she goes back to the family home.
What Remains of Edith Finch?
Yes, that's it. And that's what this kind of reminds me of. Is like technically you're safe the whole time, and like the way they tell the story is like freeze framey type stuff, but yeah, it just, the creep factor is definitely there.
Yeah, in the art style, if you've Googled it,
that's the main part. Like, the art style is incredible.
Yeah, it looks awesome. It's like it's all kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's black and white.
It's essentially what 3D would look like if 3D was possible on like the first Apple II.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the way they use the art style reflects back in the gameplay, because you can't really see people's faces that well, so you can't really use that as a comparison tool against the picture. And so that is like you can zoom in on them and be like, okay, it's this person in the picture, but the way they kind of present it is super cool, and it kind of helps you feel like you're actually a detective trying to figure out what happened on this ship.
Yeah, it's definitely artistically an achievement. And
I think it won Best Art or something at the Game Awards.
I think
or something like that. So it's well deserved of that praise for sure.
If that speaks to you, Joce, you should definitely give it a try, because it's kind of an incredible, unique experience.
I love solving mysteries.
And now the game that is not the best game of the year, according to many people, surprisingly, Red Dead Redemption 2. Did you finish it? No spoilers, but
I'm in chapter 5.
Okay, so pretty far.
So there's 6 chapters and 2 very long epilogues, so effectively 8 chapters. This game it's a slow burn at the start. If you're just trying to get through like the story and enjoy the story and the gang stuff, like that's why people fall off it so quickly. I think you don't really get the story doesn't really get interesting until chapter 4 and chapter 5 and so on. And chapter 2 is very long, but it's long on purpose. And the reason why it's so long is because it's trying to, one, introduce you to mechanics, and then it's trying to encourage you to use those mechanics outside of the story missions. So like the hunting, the fishing, all that stuff is very purposeful and methodical, and like when you're performing all these acts in the game, it really does immerse you in this world in a way that is true of a lot of games, but the performance aspect of this game completely surpasses Red Dead 1 for sure. But it's a masterclass of game, like, kind of completionism, I guess, in terms of perfectionism or whatever.
The the way I talk about, so I just got to chapter 3. I'll get back to it, and I will try to finish it at some point. There are like, you guys just added 5 games that I have to play on my list. But
I stopped at the exact same spot, actually, Patrick, is I finished the second chapter and got to chapter 3, and I don't think I actually played any of chapter 3 because I had such a like, oh my god, if they're all this long, like I'm never getting through this game, and I fell off it. I wish that they used it differently.
They're definitely not all that long.
But I think in that short time, I didn't get any interesting story. I mean, the characters are kind of very well realized, but you don't get any interesting story. By all accounts, it starts after that. But so I can't really judge the game as a complete package, but the experience you get from being in that game, in that universe, is incredible. It's I think you were trying to describe it, the way I would say it is, it's realistic to a fault, and realistic in a way that has never been approached by any other game. Parts of it is because the people at Rockstar are incredible game designers and artists and creators, but also part of it, I think, is because no one ever thought it would be a good idea to be this methodical and slow and it's artistically daring that Rockstar decided to go there. It's a game that has, as we discussed when we talked about it initially, it's a game that has a vision and that doesn't care what you think the game should be. It's going to impose its vision and its pace on you, and damn you if you don't want that, then you're not going to enjoy it, and too bad
like
for you.
We talk a lot about like the like video games as art and like what the artist like or designer or whatever like wanted to talk about. We talk about God of War, how it was really like a father-son story, and how that was the point that the developers were trying to get across. So this game also accomplishes that. It's just because it's so different in its methodicalness, like Patrick, what you're saying, like it just makes it kind of rises above, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an achievement for sure.
Yeah. Right.
But I'm just not sure it's an achievement I enjoy. You know, that's the weird thing about it. Just you played for a good amount of time as well. You fell off of it, but did you enjoy your time in it or not even?
I did. I enjoyed the main character that you play, who Arthur Morgan, I believe. Is his name. Yeah, like I really enjoyed him.
He gets more and more snarky too.
Yeah,
which is, like kind of the most endearing part about him is just how much backsass he gives everyone in the game, like all the time.
And yeah, like I enjoyed him and the character acting, and then the story that was surrounding it. I just felt like one of the big promises that they made as part of Red Dead Redemption 2 was that, you know, the world would happen around you and you would be moving your camp because you're outlaws in the, you know, last ages of the outlaws sort of thing. And, you know, you have to keep moving because the law is on you. And I never really felt that because that second chapter was so long that it was very, very different. Like I felt like almost a little bit let down because I was like, I thought this was supposed to be a little bit faster paced, and it was so slow at the beginning that you were so focused around that one town as well, right? So I felt like I wasn't being pushed out into the larger world, and so I think that's what did it.
Yeah, I mean like that first transition from chapter 2 to chapter 3 where you do move your camp, you have a whole nother town that you're involved with. So you do kind of get that feeling, but I think the slowness of traversing that world is what creates that feeling that you're feeling, Jocelyn, of like it just takes so like you're not feeling under the gun at all because I can take a 20-minute ride to the next town and that's not a problem. You know?
I can also go in the forest and you know, fish and hunt for 15 days if I want, and it doesn't really, you know.
But it like once you get past like chapter 2 and maybe even chapter 3 a little bit, then you start to the ending of every chapter is very much like, oh shit, we need to go, basically.
Yeah, you know? no spoilers. Don't say anything.
No, but I mean, like, I feel like that isn't even necessarily a spoiler because that was kind of the experience that was sold through the marketing. And I almost wish that, and I know this would probably be a nightmare from a storytelling perspective, but I almost wish that if I chose to go off into the woods and hunt for 10 days, that then I would go back to where I thought camp was. And they were like, no, we shot up a town and now like we had to go. And, you know, like Arthur would then have to like find his crew again and at the new camp or whatever. Like,
You're right.
Wish it moved a little more. It doesn't. The world doesn't live the way I thought it would.
I mean, it's the game. You're talking about the slow pace. It's its defining quality, and maybe it ramps up later. But the game is its slow pace, It's what makes it what it is, and it forces you to enjoy the environments that are incredibly realized, and the life of Arthur Morgan. I often say on this show that I call this game the Arthur Morgan simulator. It's not really a game. It's you being this guy in this environment, and them trying to make you feel as much as humanly possible, sometimes to a fault, like you are just this person.
Right.
So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's my 5.
Yeah, it's an interesting game to be, because as I mentioned, everyone thought it was going to be the game of the year, and I do want to mention I did a poll with my French listeners, and they did select it as their game of the year, which came as a surprise because every one of them that I've interacted with didn't think it was worthy of that title. But apparently the public at large, or larger, is very much liking it. It was first, I think, both if they could only choose one and if they could choose 5. So it's kind of a favorite, in spite of what the gaming press or whatever is saying. People are really enjoying it despite its slowness. So I wanted to mention this.
I'm not saying it's a bad game by any stretch. I think it's definitely up there on the list for this year. I had quite a few that just barely like I had to choose 5, and it was difficult. And I think Red Dead was it was a good experience. It was beautiful. It was well done. I'm not knocking it at all. It just maybe it was the timing of when it came out. I didn't have a ton of time to sink into it, and then it just kind of like slammed the brakes on in that chapter 2. So I didn't keep going with it in chapter 3, or I haven't picked it up again. I know that I will eventually. It just I'm not knocking the game. I did enjoy it. It just
I'm knocking it a little bit. I think
I know I saw you on Twitter and I was like, oh man, Patrick is gonna get so much heat for these tweets.
Well, I mean, the beginning, I think everyone has that same experience where you have this weird realistic uncanny valley where things that happen make no sense because everything is super realistic, but then you brush with someone with your shoulder and they get out their gun and they're like, you want to go, and I'm like, what? And like, how many times have I anyway, so everyone goes through that, and then you slow down and you get into the game. But the artistic part of it, the artistic achievement is undeniable. I think you would have to be of really, really dishonest to think that artistically it's not an incredible achievement that is probably above everything else we've seen in the past in the realistic pursuit. But as a game, that push towards realism, I'm not sure you get into conversations that are almost philosophical about what is a game. Should it be fun? Is fun necessary for a game? Is that or can it be something else? Is the experience important? Are walking simulators games? Then, and yes, obviously some of my favorite games are walking simulators, but in this case, there are arguments against it. So, but I do ask myself, essentially, I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not sure I'm having fun when I'm playing the game. And that's where the comparison with Assassin's Creed Odyssey comes in, because I was playing that and I went to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. On one hand, it was more immediate fun immediately. That's immediately twice. But on the other hand, everything felt like a toy. Everything felt like it was made for a clumsy child. As opposed to the methodical, you kept using that word, Ed, and I think it's appropriate, methodical intent of the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. But I'm still not sure, for all its praises, I'm not sure it's a good or great game. I don't have an answer, but I think the question is worth asking.
I exclaimed so loudly when you were talking about like accidentally bumping into someone because I was trying I had to reload my save 3 times in order to get out of Saint Denis the other day, because every time I would go up to my horse, the button to get on your horse is the same as the button to tackle a person. And so I would run up to my horse, I'm going fast. So it's like you're saying, like, you have to slow down a little bit, but I'm going fast. I'm running up my horse. I hit the triangle button. I tackle a guy, and then I get wanted for assault, and then all the cops come and shoot me because apparently that's a violent crime, and then I shoot them, and then now I'm wanted for murder, and then all of a sudden I have a $200 bounty on my head, and all I wanted to do was just fucking go back to the camp in order to do the next story mission.
Yeah, that's a great way of summarizing and concluding our thoughts on Red Dead Redemption 2. All right, so I guess it's my turn, and we've talked about almost all of the games on my list. My list is Celeste, in no particular order in my case, although, Celeste is first in my heart. Celeste, God of War, Assassin's Creed, Spider-Man, and the last one is Dead Cells, which I'm surprised no one even mentioned, but Dead Cells is an incredible mix, a miraculous success of a mix between all of the gaming hot trends you could think of that shouldn't work. It's a retro pixel art type style Metroidvania that is also kind of a roguelike and a Diablo, a little bit of Diablo looter sprinkled on, and also Dark Souls-y, not really Dark Souls-y, but let's throw that in because you can die quickly if you're not careful. And
you just said like all the things I absolutely hate in games.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah,
well,
like Metroidvania, like Dark Souls and roguelike and pixel. I'm like, nope.
Well, maybe Dark Souls is not a fair way of describing it, but all of the other ones are. So it's probably not a game for you.
No.
But it is a game that I got on my Switch. I did get the early access, and I didn't really get into it, and then it came out on the Switch. So of course I bought it because the Switch makes everything better. And I fell into it, and I played for hours and hours and hours. I still didn't complete it. I didn't get to the end of the initial run, but I loved every minute of it. I got almost to the end, and it's all of these what should be diluted into a soupy mess actually takes out all of the great parts of these games and makes them shine for the player. And I really think that it's one of those, I want to say, not really hidden because it's well known, but it's one of those gems that you don't necessarily think of, but is so much, it's so video gamey. It's so much video game. It's like the essence of what a video game is, compressed into a great video game. It's an incredible moment for someone to dive into and to lose yourself into. Like you will play, or at least I did. I played for hours and hours without realizing it had been that long. It's just, I love that game. It's maybe not the first one in my list, but it could easily be, I'm sure, no, that's not true. I think the reason it's not the first one is, as Jeff was saying about something else earlier, is that there are so many other incredible experiences. In any other game before, I guess, 2016, this would have been the game of the year for many, many people. And now it's barely making any list. So I love that game.
It won something at the Game Awards, though, didn't it? I thought.
I can't remember.
Best indie game, right?
No, Celeste was best indie game.
Okay.
Which
I can't remember what
was it, or was Celeste the didn't they win the Games for Good award? Wasn't that what Celeste won?
Oh, maybe. I thought it was maybe. Let's Google this real quick. I'm actually quanting.
You keep talking, Patrick.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. So yeah, anyway, well, I'm basically done talking.
Okay.
Dead Cells is an amazing game, and I encourage everyone to go
best
get it.
Action
on the Switch.
game is what it won.
Oh, best action game. Yeah, it's worthy of that. And Celeste was best indie game, which was a travesty because it should have been best game, period. But yeah.
Okay, calm down, killer.
So
I fell off of Dead Cells pretty hard. I felt like I wasn't progressing as much as I would have liked to be progressing, and that got really discouraging very fast. And so I kind of decided to play something else. I think I started playing the Messenger or something like that around this, because they all came out like August was the month of Metrovanias, where Dead Cells, Chasm, Guacamelee 2, like all these games came out all at the same time.
Well, I mean, I won't die on the hill of Dead Cells. I think they could make a better job at indicating to you how to progress and how to get those 4 runes that help you get to some parts of the levels. That could be a little bit better. I actually had to go and look it up at some point, but I won't die on the hill of Dead Cells in the way that I would die on the hill of Celeste. So yeah, take of that with you. I don't think everyone should play Dead Cells. I do think everyone should at least give Celeste a try. So that tells you something about Dead Cells as well, I guess. I will say, however, that I did a special with developers from Dead Cells, who are actually a French company, really interesting structure. They have like a flat structure where everyone gets paid the same. Everyone gets the same share of the profits. It's super weird. And we talk about things about game design that are really interesting. Their company that are really interesting as well. I had a couple of devs for, I don't know, an hour. And that's episode 91, and I would highly encourage you guys to go listen to it, because it's interesting even if you haven't played the game. So Pixels 91, you can go check it out as well. And that brings us to the end of this list, for which I wanted to try, as I mentioned, to select a game that we would all agree on, but in the same way that we did in the French version of this show called Le Rendezvous Jeu, it's impossible, because everyone has different games on their lists, and they're all worthy of being favorite games of the year. And it's not like we can, trace a through line to everyone and decide which one would be. Maybe Assassin's Creed is on more lists than other games, but still, I don't feel
I was going to say, out of the 3 of us that are still on the call, we literally do not have any matching games
at all. Yeah, it's
at all.
Amazing. And it's not like we're like, oh, one game. We have 5 each of us, and I don't think, like, even if we include Olivia and Jeff, there are like maybe 2 games that are in each other's list. Maybe with Jeff I have 3, but that's kind of it. So yeah, it's,
I would say Assassin's Creed is probably a good call, I would say, if you had to pick one.
Probably, but it also feels, I know that's the rule of, if everyone has to be to agree, you end up sometimes choosing a game that not everyone adores, but everyone's okay with.
I feel like with Assassin's Creed, since I didn't even play it, then it's on like 75% of lists of people who played it. And I didn't play it because I thought it would be bad. I didn't play it because the previous iteration of Assassin's Creed I really didn't like. So it wasn't even that I thought Odyssey was bad. It's just I avoided it because of previous Assassin's Creed titles. So
yeah, which is almost
I would be
what
okay
I did
with Odyssey.
I think, I would be okay with it too. I just want to say that I don't think it's... I love it. I love the game. It's probably the one I spent the most time on out. Well, maybe not except God of War, but I feel so much more strongly about some of the others that it would need to be a little bit of a caveat on choosing Assassin's Creed, which again, in any other year would be an easy win for most of us. So yeah, maybe Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I guess. It's not a shame at all. It's a great game, and I would encourage everyone who skipped it because of past experience to go check it out. If you have, 1,500 hours to pour into a game. So yeah, anyway, that's our list. That's our lists. And I hope you've enjoyed the banter and the discussions. It went on for a little bit longer than I thought. So thanks to both of you for sticking it out to the end. And if people want to get more of your wise commentary on games, where should they go? Let's start with Joce.
You can find me on Twitter and Twitch. I'm at Joce Plays. That's JOCE Plays. And if you like Blizzard games, I do have 2 Blizzard shows. I do For Azeroth about World of Warcraft, as well as The Angry Chicken about Hearthstone. And if you're looking for general gaming thoughts, then you can check out The Gamers Inn.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ed, what about you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Odysseus. That will be in the show notes as always. I stream live Wednesday nights, 8:00 Central Time. And tonight, I just put a poll up on my Twitter to decide what game I'm playing. Right now, I think Valkyria Chronicles 4 is winning.
I'm sorry.
I'm not.
that was mean.
So, yeah, but and then I occasionally show up on 4-Player podcast on Thursday nights. But if you're interested in hearing me and some other people that I work with to hear about games and stuff like that, you can watch us there. And sometime in like early to mid-January, we'll be posting our top 10 videos of the year, which will probably include some, if not all, of the games that I talked about tonight.
Excellent. And it's a clever thing to do it when the year has actually ended, because we didn't get to talk about Gris and
Ashen,
Below.
Below, a bunch of games just came out like this past week, so that's crazy.
I mean, to be fair, I did play through. I think I'm at the end of Greece. I played through. I'm like 3.5 hours in, so I'm probably almost done.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't be on my list. It's like a poem. It's very beautiful, but I don't think it's an experience that spoke to me as much as it does others. It's almost. This is, sorry, not to get back into it, but it's almost like quote unquote easy art, in that it's easy, beautiful. And I understand that this is very subjective, and some people would probably say this about other games that I like, but for me, it doesn't land for that reason. I think it's still beautiful. I appreciate it, but with a little bit of distance. So yeah, for me, it wouldn't have changed a lot. All right, let's not get back into it. I'm not Patrick on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, you can find this show at FrenchSpin.com. You can comment on it if you think we've said some clever things, or if you think we've said some pretty dumb things as well. Be nice about it, though. And thank you very much for listening. 100 episodes. It's kind of an achievement. I'm really glad that I've been doing this for 4 years. It's been challenging at times, but I hope I can keep going. And I thank you very, very much for listening and for being there. So keep it up, and I hopefully will as well. Thanks everyone, and see you in, I guess, 2019. Wow, that's going to be amazing as well. Talk to you soon.